Beneath the temples, beyond the myths, buried in stone and time, India hides puzzles that mock the arrogance of science. Flying machines carved into cave walls, weapons that read like nuclear fallout reports, a bridge built by monkey saw, something older. For every theory, there's a contradiction. For every answer, another locked vault. These aren't legends, they're records. And the deeper you look, the louder the silence gets. Welcome to 30 Mysteries Science Still Can't Explain. The Iron Pillar of Delhi. It's just a pillar. That's what you'd think standing in the middle of a courtyard behind the Qutb Minar, surrounded by tourists holding selfie sticks and pigeons who couldn't care less about history. It's plain, unassuming, not even particularly tall. About 23 feet of wrought iron, standing proud for over 1,600 years. But lean in a little closer, and the iron tells a story that shouldn't be possible. This isn't just a relicence, a quiet insult to modern metallurgy. Because here's the thing, this ancient iron pillar, exposed to the chaotic whims of Delhi's monsoons, brutal summers, pollution, and acid rain, doesn't rust. At least, not in the way it should. At least, not like any other iron object of its age. For 16 centuries, it's stood there, largely corrosion-free, like it's laughing in the face of science, textbooks, and engineering degrees. While bridges collapse and skyscrapers erode under nature's patient assault, this quiet column just keeps standing, untouched, eternal. It's not like scientists haven't tried to explain it. They've tested the iron. They've analyzed the microstructure. They've blamed it on phosphorus levels, on the local climate, on something called a passive protective film. Theories pile up like offerings at its base, but none quite explain why no one else, not even the highly industrialized civilizations that followed, was able to replicate this precise method of iron production. Or why the same protective film doesn't just conveniently form on other ancient metals. Because the thing no one wants to admit is, this shouldn't exist. According to the story, the iron pillar was originally erected somewhere in central India, possibly Udayagiri, during the Gupta Empire, around 400 CE. That's over 1,000 years before the Industrial Revolution, before the invention of stainless steel, and long before anyone was supposed to understand how to forge corrosion-resistant iron at such a large scale. It was eventually moved to Delhi by Anangpal Tomar in the 11th century. The fact that it survived a cross-country journey is remarkable enough. But the fact that it continues to defy entropy, right in the open air, that's something else. Let's talk metallurgy. Iron, in its natural state, is not stable. It wants to rust. Like an addict wants a fix. Like a secret wants to be spilled. The moment iron meets water and oxygen, it begins its inevitable decay into iron oxidorust. And yet, this pillar seems to have made some kind of backroom deal with nature. When metallurgists examined it, they found an unusually high concentration of phosphorus and an almost complete lack of sulfur and manganese. That's not how we make iron today because it's inefficient, inconsistent, and doesn't scale. But that exact imbalance might be the secret sauce. The high phosphorus may have encouraged the formation of a thin protective film of iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate. This film, they say, stops further corrosion. It forms slowly, takes years to stabilize, but once it's there, it stays. The iron enters a kind of passive state content, no longer seeking to oxidize further. Problem solved, right? Well, not quite. Because this particular composition should have been a one-off accident, a happy metallurgical fluke, except it's not. Other ancient Indian iron artifacts, smaller, humbler, less famous, also exhibit abnormal resistance to rust. The Delhi pillar just happens to be the grandest and most confounding example. That raises a question. Was this deliberate? Were Gupta-era blacksmiths metallurgical savants who knew exactly what they were doing, centuries ahead of their time? The inscriptions on the pillar offer a few clues inscribed in Brahmi script. They sing praises of a king believed to be Chandragupta II, the kind of monarch who didn't just build stuff. He commissioned monuments that would last forever. The inscription reads like a hymn, extolling his virtues, his victories, his godly favor. Maybe it's metaphor. Maybe it's literal. Maybe it's both. But beyond the poetry, beyond the metallurgical data, there's a different kind of mystery. One that has nothing to do with science and everything to do with what the pillar represents. The idea of forgotten mastery. Because it's one thing to find something old. It's another thing to find something old and better than what we can make today. That rattles people. It subverts our sense of progress. The iron pillar isn't just rust-proof, it's ego-proof. A quiet accusation carved in iron. And then there's the weirder stuff. Some legends claim the pillar sits atop the hood of a massive underground serpent. Others say it marks the spot where Lord Vishnu pinned down the cosmic serpent Shesha, anchoring the Earth's axis. According to medieval lore, anyone who could encircle the pillar with their arms, back turned to it, and make their hands meet, would have their wish granted. Spoiler, too many people tried. So the government fenced it off. Now you have to wish with your wallet. But these stories, these serpents, these wishes, they hint at something deeper. That the pillar is a marker, a symbol, maybe even a warning. Because as modern empires rot from within, and concrete crumbles under its own weight, this ancient column just stands there, indifferent, silent, timeless. You want irony? The pillar stood for centuries undisturbed until the British arrived. In 1862, a man named Thomas Babington, a colonial engineer with more ambition than sense, tried to remove the decorative top of the pillar. His team failed. Then he chiseled off a chunk of the inscription to take home as a souvenir. Very scientific, very classy. That piece is now lost. No one knows where it went. Maybe it's rusting somewhere in a London attic. Maybe it's cursed. Who knows? The point is, the Iron Pillar of Delhi survived time, weather, war, and conquest. But it didn't survive curiosity. And maybe that's the lesson. We don't really know how it was made. We don't know why that exact composition came together, or whether it was intentional. We've simulated it in labs, but never matched its longevity in real-world conditions. It's not just an anomaly, it's an insult to our linear narrative of progress. And yet we walk past it. Every day, thousands of people breeze by without a second glance, checking off tourist boxes, unaware they're standing next to an unsolved equation in iron. Because here's what they don't tell you in school. Sometimes the ancient world was better at building things than we are. Sometimes the past is not primitive, it's just quiet. And while we argue over patents and intellectual property, that ancient column just watches, waiting to be understood. Or maybe, just maybe, it's not meant to be. Because if we can't even replicate a simple rust-proof pole, what happens when we start digging into the bigger stuff? What happens when we stop seeing the past as behind us and start realizing it might be ahead? That brings us to the next puzzle. Not a pillar, but a society. Not built from metal, but from secrets. A group so hidden, so meticulously concealed in history, they're either the greatest hoax ever pulled or the quiet custodians of ancient power. Ashoka knew them. Some say Tesla did too. They're called the 9 Unknown Men. The 9 Unknown Men. It always starts the same way with a war, a bloodbath, a king who sees too much death and decides knowledge itself is the true danger. That's the official myth, at least. The year is 261 BCE. The Kalinga War has ended. Over 100,000 bodies lie cooling in the sun. The Ganges runs pink with blood, and Emperor Ashoka, same ruthless conqueror who razed cities without blinking, has an existential breakdown. The story goes, he swore off violence, converted to Buddhism, and then, in secret, created one of the most chilling intellectual conspiracies in history, the 9 Unknown Men. The idea is as elegant as it is terrifying. Ashoka, now a self-declared guardian of peace, realizes that certain kinds of knowledge are too dangerous to be left in public hands. That human beings, given the tools of destruction, will always choose fire over reason. So instead of locking these discoveries in a vault or destroying them altogether, he does something different. He divides them. 9 men, 9 books, each one containing a domain of forbidden science. No names, no titles, no legacy, just guardianship. Each man is entrusted with one arrayedly, world-altering, and meant to be hidden from everyone else. They are scholars, spies, scribes, and possibly immortals. Because, depending on who you ask, the 9 have either vanished from history or have been quietly steering it for over 2,000 years. Sound like a myth? Good. That's exactly how they'd want it to sound. Let's dig into the files. According to esoteric Indian lore, especially through the works of Talbot Mundy, a British author whose 1923 novel, The 9 Unknown, brought the legend to Western readers, the 9 disciplines are terrifyingly precise. Propaganda and psychological warfare. Techniques for controlling the masses. The original guide to memetics, persuasion, and institutional manipulation. Some say it was used to convert entire kingdoms without lifting a sword. Physiology. Knowledge of the human body, including how to kill or heal instantly. Pressure points. Energy flows. Resurrection? Maybe. Assassination without a trace? Definitely. Microbiology. Centuries before germ theory, this book allegedly covered diseases and their weaponization. Biowarfare before microscopes. Alchemy and transmutation. Turning metals into gold? Maybe. But more likely, it was about energy transformation, matter manipulation, quantum-level games with the physical world. Communication. Possibly the most cryptic. Some believe it included ways to communicate telepathically or across vast distances without technology. Gravity and anti-gravity. Flying machines, floating structures, unnamed forces. Sound familiar? Vimanas may have been Chapter 1. Cosmology. Star maps, planetary cycles, possibly wormholes or parallel dimensions. The kind of celestial knowledge that makes modern astronomy look quaint. Light. Optics, invisibility, lasers. Yes, lasers. Not metaphorical, not mystical, just light weaponized or perfected. Sociology. The mathematical blueprint of civilization. How societies rise, how they fall, how to push them either way. No one has ever seen these books. No manuscript has surfaced, no physical evidence, but that's the beauty of it. If they were ever real, the 9 would have had 2 millennia to hide themselves better than any modern intelligence agency ever could. And yet, like all good conspiracies, fingerprints remain. Let's play connect the dots. The medieval Indian alchemist Nagarjuna was said to have performed transmutations, transforming base metals into gold and concocting life-prolonging elixirs. He disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Coincidence? Then there's Pope Sylvester II, who allegedly traveled to India in the 10th century and returned with unexplainable knowledge of automata, astronomy, and cryptography. Upon his death, his body was mutilated to ensure he hadn't been in league with demons. Even modern figures like Nikola Tesla are often folded into the myth. Tesla famously claimed that his ideas came to him in flashes if transmitted. He was obsessed with vibration, frequency, and energy in ways that eerily echo the 9's reported domains. Did he read one of the books? Did one of the 9 reach out? Of course, this is where academia rolls its collective eyes. There is no hard historical record of Ashoka founding such a group. The legend isn't mentioned in mainstream Ashokan edicts or texts. No palace records. No Buddhist scriptures. The earliest concrete mentions come from speculative fiction and colonial fringe writing. But even that detail is suspicious. Ashoka was known for his rock edict-scarved proclamations scattered across his empire. They touch on ethics, animal rights, religious tolerance. They're curiously silent on the Kalinga War. And more curiously, some of them include ominous warnings against entering certain regions. In particular, the so-called no-go zones, forests or hills where, allegedly, knowledge was buried. What kind of emperor tells his people to avoid knowledge? Unless that's the point. Because here's where it gets darker. Maybe the 9 didn't preserve knowledge. Maybe they filtered it, shaped it, doled it out in bits and pieces, just enough to keep civilization moving forward but never fast enough to implode. Maybe all those sudden bursts of technological advancement, Renaissance art, the scientific revolution, the atomic age were engineered releases, controlled leaks, humanity fed by an eyedropper. Imagine being one of them, an immortal librarian, watching empires rise and fall while you guard a book that could unmake the world in a week. Do you burn it? Do you hide it? Do you hand it to someone with good intentions and pray? Now imagine the opposite. That the 9 are no longer benevolent, that they've fractured. Some still guarding the light, others selling it. And maybe, just maybe, the age of secrets is ending. Which brings us to the real question. Why now? Why are so many of these ancient secrets being re-examined, resurfacing, leaking into pop culture and pseudoscience, even sneaking into mainstream science under the name of lost technologies? Is it because the 9 are slipping? Or is it because we're finally catching up? Think about it. The last 100 years have seen more technological change than the previous 2000. We now have CRISPR, quantum computers, AI that writes scripts like this one. And still we don't understand gravity. We don't have clean energy. We don't know how the brain works. Maybe that's not a failure. Maybe that's intentional. Because if these books exist, and they fall into the wrong hands, the world doesn't get smarter, it burns. That's the core paradox of the 9 unknown men. The smartest people in the world, hiding their genius for fear that we can't be trusted with it. Which sounds depressingly accurate. So the next time you read about a technological marvel from ancient India that sounds impossible, ask yourself, is it impossible, or is it just redacted? And if 9 men could hide knowledge that deep for that long, what else have they buried? Maybe structures that shouldn't stand, temples that mock engineering limits, monuments so precise, so impossible, that they shouldn't exist without machines we haven't invented yet. Like a temple not built, but carved. From the top down, out of a single mountain. The Kailasa temple, carved from a single rock. You think you've seen temples, grandeur in marble, precision in sandstone, towers that scrape the sky and columns that reach like fingers toward the heavens, but none of that prepares you for Kailasa. You don't walk into this temple, you descend into it. Like stepping into a forgotten memory the earth itself has been keeping. There are no bricks, no scaffolding, no assembly. Just one colossal rock cut, hollowed, sculpted into a temple so complex it mocks modern construction. Welcome to Ellora, Maharashtra, India, home to Cave 16, better known as Kailasa Temple. The name is poetic. Kailasathi, mythical abode of Lord Shiva, floating in the Himalayas. Except this one doesn't float. It sits, heavy and arrogant, hewn directly out of black basalt like some divine prank on civil engineering. And here's the part that makes architects drink before noon. It was carved from the top down. Let that sink in. No scaffolding, No external structures, no blueprints as we know them. The builders started at the summit of a solid mountain and carved downward, removing over 400,000 tons of rock by hand until they reached the base. The precision is insane. The symmetry? Mathematical. The mistakes? Non-existent. There are temples that take centuries to build. This one was carved without error. There's no other structure like it on Earth. Mainstream archaeology estimates it was built in the 8th century by King Krishna I of the Rashtrakuta dynasty. They suggest it took no more than 18 years. That's a generous deadline if you have lasers and cranes. If you're relying on chisels, hammers, and human muscle, that timeline enters the realm of fantasy. Do the math. To remove 400,000 tons in under 2 decades, you'd need to extract around 60 tons of solid rock per day, every day, without breaks, without weather delays, without anyone sneezing wrong and snapping a column. All while carving delicate figurines, mythological scenes, ornate ceilings, and freestanding monoliths all out of the same rock. Oh Hand, did we mention the temple is multi-leveled, has drainage systems, and contains intricate sculptures of deities, animals, and cosmic scenes? That it's aligned according to ancient astronomical principles? That the entire layout forms a massive mandala when viewed from above? But sure, primitive tools, hand labor, 18 years. And that's assuming they started with a detailed plan. But according to most scholars, there's no physical record of blueprints, no documentation, no inscriptions detailing how they did it. Just the temple and its silence. This isn't just artistic genius, it's architectural heresy. Some propose the existence of a now-lost building technology, maybe sonic tools or geosoftening techniques that allowed stone to be shaped like clay. Sound crazy? Sure, but so is the temple. Others suggest an alternative history, that the temple is far older than the 8th century, that the Rashtrakutas merely restored or expanded it, that it may predate recorded history itself, left behind by a culture advanced enough to literally carve mountains. Even NASA's satellite imagery has noted the mind-bending scale of the temple, which appears as a perfect geometric form etched into the bedrock. It's not just artistic, it's computational. And let's not forget the symbology. Kailasa isn't just any god's temple. It's dedicated to Shiva, the destroyer and transformer, the cosmic dancer whose movements unravel the universe. A deity not just worshipped, but understood as a metaphor for quantum creation and entropy. So, now picture this. In a landscape riddled with caves and shrines, one mountain is selected, not built on but from. The very act of construction is destruction, subtraction instead of addition, negative space as creation. It's almost metaphysical. And yet somehow, in this mountain-minus temple, there's no chaos. The columns are perfectly balanced. The corridors resonate with symmetrical acoustics. It feels engineered, like someone programmed it rather than carved it. In fact, modern 3D scanning has revealed a digital-like order to the internal layout, prompting some to compare its structure to modern algorithms. The temple isn't just functional or spiritual, it's coded. Like someone encoded information in stone, and no one's cracked it yet. There's another theory, of course, one that dares to whisper what archaeologists hate to hear: extraterrestrial influence. Ancient alien theorists argue that the complexity, precision, and top-down excavation point to a technology we don't have, perhaps never had. They suggest that Ellora is part of a global pattern temples like this one in India, structures like Pumapunku in Bolivia, the Osirian in Egypt monuments that don't fit their time frames, or their tools. Are they right? Probably not. But they are asking the question mainstream science avoids: how? And more importantly, why? Because Kailasa isn't just impressive, it's excessive, over-engineered, brutally labor-intensive. Why carve this temple into a mountain when you could just build one? Why risk collapse, error, imbalance? Unless the point wasn't just to build a temple but to prove something. Some believe Kailasa is a message, a geological statement, an act of defiance. Others think it's a kind of energy temple aligned with ley lines, channeling subtle vibrations from the earth. Many believe the entire structure vibrates with Shakti, a cosmic feminine energy, concentrated and amplified by the solid rock medium. It's not impossible. Sensitive instruments have detected unusual electromagnetic activity in the region, especially near the sanctum. One study found that chanting specific mantras inside the temple amplifies resonance in ways not seen in modern churches or mosques. Coincidence? Design? Maybe the mountain was alive and the temple was how they spoke to it. But there's something darker too. A sense that this was not just a shrine, but a seal, a cage, a lock carved to hold something in or out. After all, Shiva isn't just a creator. He's the god of destruction, of endings, the destroyer of time. What if Kailasa wasn't a tribute, but a containment unit? What if the act of subtractive architecture was not aesthetic, but ritual, not for the gods but for something beneath? Myths whisper of ancient beings that sleep in mountains, of energies too old to name. Some even claim the mountain shudders on certain nights that the stone breathes. That monks stationed at the site experience vivid dreams, hallucinations, time lapses, of rooms that weren't there the day before, of doorways that go nowhere. Let's say for a moment that's true. Then Kailasa becomes something far stranger than a monument. It becomes a map, a machine, a memory. Something carved not to be used, but to be remembered. Or, perhaps, to remind the earth itself of something it once knew. Here's what we do know. Science can't explain the logistics. Engineers scratch their heads. Historians speculate in circles. And the temple just stands there carved from silence, humming with forgotten logic. And when you stand at the base and look up past the elephants, the lion pillars, the gargantuan shikara, you realize you're not in a temple, you're inside a riddle. A riddle without a punchline. So maybe it wasn't meant to be solved. Just like the Vedas, just like the Mahabharata, just like the stories of a river that once gave birth to a civilization then vanished without a trace. A river with no mouth, a ghost with no corpse, and a disappearance science still refuses to acknowledge. The disappearance of the Saraswati River. If you look at a map of ancient Indian civilization, something doesn't add up. The Indus Valley sites Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Lothalthe sprawl across modern-day Pakistan and northwest India like fossils of forgotten genius. But then your eyes shift eastward, inland, toward a dry riverbed called the Ghaggar Hakra, and you realize something deeply unsettling. The cities don't follow the Indus. They follow something else. Something gone. Welcome to the enigma of the Saraswati Rivera River, so sacred it was sung about in the Rig Veda, the oldest known text in the Indo-Aryan tradition. A river praised more than the Ganges. Described not as a stream or a tributary, but as a roaring, thunderous, life-giving deity. Ambatam, Naditam, Devatam, the best of mothers, rivers, and goddesses. The only problem? It's not there anymore. There is no Saraswati on modern maps, no glimmering river matching its glory. Just a dusty trench running through Rajasthan and parts of Punjab, disappearing into the Thar Desert like a forgotten artery of the earth. And yet, when you zoom in, satellite images reveal what looks eerily like the dried skeleton of a once massive river, a lost highway of water. The ancients weren't lying. The Saraswati was real. And it was massive. And then it wasn't. So what happened? Mainstream archaeology says this. The Saraswati was a Himalayan river, born from glacial melt and rain-fed tributaries. Over time, thousands of years' tectonic shifts and climate changes altered its course. Earthquakes diverted its feeder streams. The Yamuna went east, the Sutlej turned west, and the once mighty Saraswati was abandoned. It dried up, its civilizations collapsed, and history forgot it. Simple, neat, scientific. Except, not really. Because the disappearance of Saraswati doesn't behave like a slow extinction. It behaves like a vanishing, abrupt, jarring, catastrophic. Not a river that dried over millennia, but one that blinked out of existence along with dozens of cities, countless people, and an entire chapter of human history. You don't build advanced urban settlements, drainage systems, planned streets, granaries, fire altars along a dying river. And yet, that's what the archaeological record shows. Flourishing cities right up to the edge of where the Saraswati should have been, right before everything collapses. Thousands of years of civilization. Poof. It's as if the river didn't just dry, it withdrew. That idea that the earth itself might have recollitus not as outlandish as it sounds. Some researchers believe the river's disappearance coincided with a global climate shift around 1900 BCE period, marked by sudden collapses across ancient societies. The Akkadians in Mesopotamia, the Old Kingdom in Egypt, the Minoans. Something was happening. Something big. And the Saraswati may have been a casualty of more than just local tectonics. Now here's where things get weirder. The Rigveda mentions the Saraswati over 70 times, more than any other river, but later Vedic texts written only a few centuries later speak of her as already gone, described as flowing in the sky, or remembered only in metaphor. That's not just poetic decay, that's a cultural trauma. An entire civilization trying to make sense of a river that vanished while people were still building temples to it. And the Gagar-Hakra? It's not a trickle, it's a trench, a dried riverbed so vast that even modern satellite radar picks it up from space. Geological surveys have found ancient river channels, deeply incised, suggesting flows larger than the present-day Ganges. Sediment cores reveal freshwater deposits deep, ones proving that the river once gushed where now there is only sand. Here's the punchline. Despite overwhelming physical, textual, and satellite evidence, modern science still won't officially acknowledge the Gagar-Hakra as the Saraswati. It's probable, possible, hypothesized. Because to confirm it would mean rewriting too much chronologies, migration models, linguistic theories. It would mean admitting that the Saraswati civilization, not the Indus, might have been the true cradle of ancient India. And that makes people uncomfortable. But let's ask the forbidden question. What if Saraswati didn't just disappear naturally? What if something else happened? Some ancient Indian myths speak of the river being swallowed by the earth. Others say Saraswati became invisible, flowing underground as a subterranean stream. And here's where science begrudgingly nods, because modern hydrology has indeed found evidence of paleochannels beneath the Thar Desert, suggesting that the river may still flow, in secret, under the ground. How do you erase a river that size? Maybe you don't. Maybe you bury it. Still others claim Saraswati ascended to the heavens, becoming a celestial river, which sounds mythological until you realize that several Vedic references align Saraswati with the Milky Way, a galactic river, a mirrored path, Earth's memory of a river lost, or perhaps stolen. Now add this. At least 2 major earthquakes hit northwestern India around 2000 BCE, enough to divert river systems, fracture landscapes, and sever aquifers. Imagine a civilization waking up to find their river gone. Not receding, not drying, just missing. And then there's the other, possibilityless, geological, more existential. What if Saraswati didn't just leave physically but dimensionally? A wild theory, sure, but one echoed in esoteric texts and tantric lore, that sacred rivers, like all sacred things, exist in layers of reality. That Saraswati was not just a river, but a channel between worlds, and that whatever was coming through had to be sealed. Think about it. A river that vanishes underground, revered as a goddess, tied to knowledge and speech, withdrawn from this plane but never quite gone. What if the Vedic sages didn't just lose a river but hid it, as if some knowledge was meant to flow once, and never again? That idea haunts the subtext of every Saraswati hymn. She's not just praised, she's pleaded with, as if she's being asked to return, or to forgive. Because when Saraswati left, she didn't just take water, she took memory. The cities died. The language fractured. The scripts went silent. The Indus script, still undeciphered, lines the ruins like whispering ghosts. And then came the long night centuries, where the center didn't hold, and the gods stopped answering. That's not just climate change. That's a civilizational erasure. So here we are, millennia later, trying to resurrect her with LiDAR scans and sediment studies, hoping to trace her bones in the dust, as if finding her might somehow bring back what we lost, as if proving she was real might restore the story. But maybe Saraswati's greatest mystery isn't that she vanished. Maybe it's that we forgot how to see her. Which brings us to the next puzzle. Something else we see but don't really understand. A bridge that shouldn't exist. A line of stones stretching across the sea, visible from space. Dismissed as coincidence, but shaped with too much intent. Pointing directly to myth, to war, to God. A causeway between two worlds built by monkeys, or someone even stranger. The floating stones of Ram Setu, Adam's bridge. It's a line of stones. That's it. Nothing fancy, nothing glowing. Just a chain of limestone shoals stretching across the ocean between India and Sri Lanka. But from 35,000 feet in the air or from a satellite doesn't look accidental, it looks designed. They call it Ram Setu, or Adam's Bridge, depending on who's doing the explaining. To some, it's a miracle. To others, a geological quirk. To believers, it's proof. And to scientists, an uncomfortable shrug. Because Ram Setu is one of those things that shouldn't exist in its current form. Not like this. Not in this place. And certainly not in a way that lines up perfectly with an epic from thousands of years ago. Let's rewind. According to the ancient Hindu epic, the Ramayana, the god King Rama set out to rescue his wife Sita, who'd been abducted by the demon king Ravana and held captive in Lanka. But there was a problem. An ocean separated him from his destination. So Rama turned to his allies, an army of Vanaras, or monkey men. Under the leadership of the general Nala, they built a bridge across the sea in just 5 days, using floating stones marked with Rama's name. Myth, right? Except the bridge is real. Stretching over 30 kilometers from Dhanushkodi in Tamil Nadu to Mannar Island in Sri Lanka, the formation sits just beneath the surface of the water. It's visible in satellite images taken by NASA, ISRO, and commercial aerial surveys, and it's nearly perfectly linear, suspiciously so. Initially dismissed as a natural formation, perhaps a coral reef, maybe a sandbar, definitely not man-made, the bridge became a quiet controversy. Then in 2002, things escalated. NASA released satellite imagery that clearly showed the formation, and Indian news media exploded. People asked the inevitable question, was the Ramayana real? The Indian government specifically, the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, quickly stepped in and declared that there was no historical evidence to suggest the bridge was man-made, that the Ramayana was myth, that the stones were just an accident of geology. Nothing to see here. Move along. And yet, the stones don't behave like natural formations. They're porous, lightweight, and many float on water, a property that should not exist in typical coral or compacted limestone. Samples collected by geologists, divers, and researchers have repeatedly shown unusual buoyancy, Some claim the rocks are pumice volcanic stone full of air pockets, but there's no volcanic activity in that region. Others suggest ancient civil engineering. Others say magic. What makes it worse for skeptics is that everything lines up. The route matches the one described in the Ramayana. The locations mentioned Rameswaram, Dhanushkodi, Lankare, geographically accurate. The bridge sits exactly where the epic says it should. And the age? That's where things spiral. Some geological studies date the sand beneath the bridge to around 4,000 years ago, but the stones on top, the ones forming the bridge, are much younger, maybe 1,000 to 1,500 years old, which means the foundation is ancient, but the structure itself, younger. Unless the stones were placed there manually. That would mean someone, at some point, decided to construct a bridge across the ocean using stone blocks that somehow float atop a pre-existing sandbar that had been there since antiquity. Which brings us back to the monkey army. Let's talk about the Veneras, traditionally translated as monkeys, but also depicted as humanoid beings with intelligence, language, and architecture. Some scholars argue that Venara might not mean monkey in the literal sense, but a separate hominid species, a now extinct offshoot of humanity, or even a race of technologically advanced forest dwellers, possibly what today we'd classify as non-human intelligences. They built the bridge in 5 days, the story says. And after Rama's victory, the gods submerged the bridge beneath the waves. But they didn't destroy it, they just covered it, which is suspiciously similar to what happened. Here's a wild theory. What if the Ramayana is not just mythology, but encrypted history, a record of an ancient event, stylized through epic poetry and divine metaphor? Rama, a deified human king. Venaras, an allied species. Ravana, a rival civilization. And Ram Setu, a literal engineering feat built by hands, remembered by hymns. Sound crazy? Sure, but consider this. Humans forget things fast. We live in a world where people debate whether the moon landing happened, and that was only 60 years ago. Multiply that cultural entropy across millennia, and advanced engineering by a now lost people becomes monkey god built a magic bridge. And here's what modern archaeology rarely admits. We still don't know how ancient megalithic structures were built. We pretend to. But when it comes to lifting 100-ton blocks with Stone Age tools, or constructing water-resistant cities without cement, or carving temples from mountaintops without blueprints, we quietly look away. Ram Setu is part of that same dissonance. The bridge exists, its structure is anomalous, its location aligns with legend, and it challenges the linear model of history. Even more disturbing? Attempts to dredge or alter the bridge have been met with backlash, storms, or mysterious failures. The Indian government proposed creating a shipping canal through the area, the Sethusamudram project, which would cut travel time for ships. But every effort hit a wall. Lawsuits, religious protests, technical challenges, and, some say, divine resistance. To many, the bridge isn't just sacred, it's alive, a relic with agency. Which brings us to the real question, who built it? If the Ramayana is partly true, then the Venaras were the engineers. But even if the story is metaphor, it implies that an ancient people had both the knowledge and reason to build a 30-kilometer ocean bridge thousands of years ago. Why? For war? For migration? For ritual? And what happened to them? They didn't just vanish, they were folded into myth, deified, erased, which, historically speaking, is what happens when civilizations collapse. The winners write textbooks, the losers become legends. But the stones remain, floating, silent, stubborn. Here's a final twist. In 2007, during a satellite scan of the Indian Ocean floor, researchers found what appeared to be man-made structures in deeper water alignments, grids, patterns suggestive of submerged architecture. Not near Ram Setu, but deeper, possibly older. Another layer, another bridge, another civilization. We're not just looking at a bridge. We're looking at an echo, a buried history speaking in architecture. And science, for all its tools, still doesn't know what to do with echoes. Because if Ram Setu is real and not just real, but deliberate, then the timeline of human achievement stretches much further back than we're willing to admit. Past the Indus, past Mesopotamia, past the point where primitive becomes a word we're no longer allowed to use. And if we're wrong about this bridge, then what else are we wrong about? Maybe everything. Like the idea that cities only last until the sea takes them. Like the belief that myth and memory are separate. Like the story of Dwaraka's shining golden city built by a god, cursed to be drowned. A city science swore was fiction. Until they started finding ruins underwater. The hidden chamber of Padmanabhaswamy Temple. You know what fear looks like. It's not a monster in the dark. Not a ghost with unfinished business. Not even a god with too many arms and too few explanations. Real fear is a vault. A door. A sealed ancient chamber with no key, no handle, and no clear reason why opening it might doom us all. Welcome to the Padmanabhaswamy Temple, Kerala, India. A place that makes Indiana Jones look underfunded and Dan Brown seem optimistic. A temple that houses one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of our time and possibly the greatest hidden treasure in human history. But the real prize isn't gold. It's a door that no one dares open. Let's rewind. Padmanabhaswamy isn't just a temple. It's a nexus where mythology, monarchy, and metaphysics crash headfirst into bureaucracy and national policy. It's dedicated to Lord Vishnu, reclining on the cosmic serpent Ananta, floating in eternal sleep. The temple, a fusion of Dravidian and Chera architecture, has stood in various forms for centuries. But its most famous moment came not from worship, but from a court order. In 2011, the Indian Supreme Court mandated an audit of the temple's assets. The temple, run for centuries by the royal family of Travancore, had long been the subject of rumor, whispers of treasure, of vaults, of something vast hidden beneath its floors. Then they started opening the vaults. They were labeled A through F. Vault A opened. Inside they found gold coins, necklaces, diamond-studded crowns, ancient idols worth billions, yes, billions of dollars, and not hypothetical billions. Real, hard, audited, glimmering wealth. A hoard so staggering it instantly made the temple the richest religious institution on earth. Vaults B, C, D, E, F, similar though smaller. Then came Vault B, and everything changed. Vault B remained sealed, not due to locks or laws, but fear. This isn't a room. It's a legend carved into stone. A chamber sealed by mystic symbols, guarded by serpent engravings, and said to be locked with a Nagabandhama ritualistic curse invoked by ancient tantrics. The kind of spell that doesn't come with an undo button. The priest said no. The royal family said no. Even the court, once curious, hesitated. Because opening Vault B isn't just archaeology. It's provocation. According to temple lore, Vault B is not meant to be opened until the end of the current cosmic cycle. Its contents? Unknown. Maybe more treasure. Maybe ancient texts. Maybe nothing. Or maybe something far worse. A weapon, a relic, a force. Because the legends surrounding it are disturbing. It is said that the chamber is protected by guardians, not metaphorical ones, but literal metaphysical entities. That disturbing it without the correct ritual zones that have been forgotten could unleash disaster. That Vault B is not just locked, it is alive. It watches, it waits. And maybe it remembers. Here's the kicker. Several groups have tried to open it. One team, using mechanical tools, reported strange vibrations and metallic screeching despite the door being stone. Another team claimed that snakes' actual cobras began appearing inexplicably around the entrance. Even rational engineers began using words like energy field. Then came the dream reports, nightmares, sudden illnesses, sudden deaths. Coincidence? Maybe. But maybe not. There's a deeper theory. That Vault B doesn't contain treasure, it contains knowledge, the kind not meant for humans anymore. Some say it holds ancient manuscripts from before the Vedic age. Others believe it contains a record of time itself, a cosmic ledger. Others go further, that inside is a gateway, not metaphorical, literal rift, a wormhole, a dimensional bleed, a sealed tier between our world and something else. Still think it's just a room? Let's go back to the name. Padmanabhaswamy. The deity depicted is Vishnu, Lord of Preservation, reclining on the endless serpent of time. His navel births Brahma, the creator. This is not just divine iconography. It's cosmic engineering, a symbolic diagram of creation, preservation, and recursion. The temple isn't just a place of worship, it's a model. Now place a sealed door in the middle of that model. A chamber that no one opens. A void at the center of divinity. That's not just architectural, that's intentional. A locked room in the house of God. And it doesn't end there. Satellite imaging and subsurface sonar have suggested that beneath the temple complex lies a vast network of unexplored corridors, chambers, possibly entire levels yet to be mapped. Some believe the temple is far larger underground than above, that the visible structure is just the tip of a subterranean iceberg, and that Vault B is not the end, but the beginning. The beginning of something we once knew, and wisely forgot. Let's ask a brutal question. What if Vault B contains proof, not just of wealth or scripture, but of something that breaks our current model of history? What if the temple was built to preserve something knowledge-y, data, a cosmic artifact, something too dangerous for public hands? Why else seal it with a curse? Why else would priests, kings, and scientists all flinch at the same threshold? Vault B is Schrödinger's box at national scale. It contains either nothing or everything, and we are terrified to open it because we suspect we'll find the latter. Here's the final irony. In the Bhagavata Purana, Krishna warns that at the end of each age, truth will be buried, knowledge will be lost, the sacred will be hidden beneath the profane, the wise will become the mad. The protectors of secrets will be dismissed as lunatics, and when mankind finally rediscovers what it lost, it will be unprepared. Vault B feels like that prophecy in stone. A warning, a pause, a test. And we're still deciding whether to turn the key. But that's the thing about mysteries. They don't stay sealed forever. The more we push, the more the stone creaks. And maybe, just maybe, when the door finally opens, we won't find gold. We'll find a mirror. And on the other side, a weapon, a vibration, a book, or a machine that flies. Because if we've locked away that much, what else have we grounded? What else used to soar? The lost technology of ancient Vimanas. Flying machines are supposed to be new. They're supposed to be 20th century marvels, the legacy of Da Vinci's sketches and Wright brothers' wingspart of a clean, linear, progressive story of human flight. Balloons, propellers, jets, rockets. Rinse, repeat. Believe in the future. And yet, sitting in ancient Sanskrit manuscripts older than Christianity, Vimanas quietly crashed that narrative into a smoking crater. They're not symbolic, not metaphorical, not dreamt-up metaphysical chariots of fire. No, they are flying machines. Mechanical, weaponized, fueled, navigated, and fully operational thousands of years ago. Let's start with the basics. In ancient Indian texts especially, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and the Vaimanika Shastra Vimanas are described as aerial vehicles of the gods. But they're not chariots. They don't have horses. They don't flap wings. They're ships, flying, multi-level, rotating vessels that resemble modern-day aircraft, Vermont OL crafts, or even UFOs, depending on your level of optimism. In the Ramayana, we find Pushpaka Vimana, the flying chariot of Ravana, originally built by the god Kubera. It's described as self-propelled, capable of flight at will, and able to hold numerous passengers. When Rama returns to Ayodhya after defeating Ravana, he flies it home. The Mahabharata goes further. Vimanas are used in aerial warfare. They fire projectiles, emit blinding light beams, create thunderous sounds, and can become invisible. Some were circular, some cigar-shaped, some pyramid-like, some emitted mercury vapor, some spun on vertical axles. The descriptions are bizarrely technical, more like user manuals than religious poetry. You might expect these to be late embellishments. They're not. These are verses from texts thousands of years old, dating back to when the Greeks were still inventing philosophy, and humans supposedly didn't know how to build beyond huts. But the most shocking document comes not from mythology, but from a controversial 20th century rediscovery, the Vaimanika Shastra. Allegedly dictated in the early 1900s by a mystic named Subbaraya Shastri, who said he received it through psychic transmission from the ancient sage. Bharadwajathe Vaimanika Shastra is a Sanskrit treatise detailing the operation of ancient flying machines. The text is stunning. It describes types of Vimanas, Rukma, Sundara, Tripura, Shakuna. Flight modes: vertical, hovering, zigzag. Energy sources: solar power, mercury ion engines, atmospheric electricity. Construction materials: heat-absorbing metals, anti-gravity alloys. Pilot protocols and anti-detection systems. At one point, it details a system for becoming invisible, using a combination of internal vibration and solar reflection. Another section explains how to neutralize enemy Vimanas mid-air, using focused sound waves. It even suggests materials not native to Earth, somewhat casually. It's the kind of text that sounds like a fever dream. And maybe it is. Or maybe it's something worse. A fragment of real science, stripped of its context and left to rot in mythology. Skeptics, of course, dismissed the Vaimanika Shastra as nonsense. In 1974, a team of scientists at the Indian Institute of Science reviewed the text and declared it aerodynamically unviable. Too heavy, too inefficient, too mystical. But here's what they didn't consider. They were using modern physics to critique a forgotten paradigm. That's like trying to decode an iPhone with a sundial. The Shastra doesn't care about Bernoulli principles. It speaks in an entirely different language, one of vibration, resonance, and energy harmonics, the kind that aligns more with modern quantum field theory than Newtonian mechanics. Maybe that's why it sounds like gibberish to scientists. Because it's not wrong, it's incompatible. And even if Subbaraya Shastri made it all up, how did a village mystic, with no formal education, invent 100 pages of Sanskrit aeronautical engineering? With diagrams, specifications, and materials science? The answer, if you believe the transmission story, is even more unsettling. He didn't invent it, he just remembered it. Which leads to the bigger question. Where did this knowledge come from? And why did it vanish? Let's go full speculative. There's a theory fringe, yes, but compelling, that ancient India experienced a technological age that rivaled or surpassed our own. That civilizations like Dwaraka weren't just spiritually advanced, but mechanically sophisticated. That Vimanas weren't poetic metaphors, but vehicles the last survivors of a pre-collapse technological paradigm. What collapsed it? Maybe war, maybe cosmic cycles, maybe entropy. But here's where things spiral. The Mahabharata describes battles that sound like nuclear warfare. Airborne weapons, beams that melt armor, blasts that blind and kill by heat and radiation, survivors who lose hair and nails, soil rendered barren. The detonation of a single projectile, charged with all the power of the universe. Mushroom, cloud metaphors, thousands of years before Hiroshima. And what carried those weapons? Vimanas. Let's pretend, just for a moment, that's all real. Then these aren't myths. They're declassified documents in disguise, historical records encoded in allegory. And the Vimanas aren't just relics, they're warnings. Because nothing in the Vaimanika Shastra suggests peace. These are military crafts, machines of control, capable of surveillance, stealth, and destruction. And their operators? Described as siddhis-perfected beings, not gods, not angels, just humans who had mastered energy manipulation to such a degree that they could fly, vanish, and kill from the sky. In other words, technocrats. Or maybe technomancers. People who understood the universe's operating system and rewrote it. And when they fell, whether by hubris or warmth, knowledge was buried, fragmented into mythology, encoded into temple carvings, whispered through mantras, hidden in plain sight. Until one day, we'd be arrogant enough to rediscover it, and think it was ours. But here's the final, poetic twist. The Vaimanika Shastra is incomplete. Scholars agree that it's a fragment, a piece of a larger, now lost corpus. Which means somewhere, out there, buried in palm leaf manuscripts, locked behind vaults, or perhaps sealed beneath temples like Padmanabha Swami, there might be more. Blueprints, engines, simulators, or even a Vimana itself. Imagine finding it. What would we do? Try to reverse engineer it? Try to fly it? Try to weaponize it? Probably. And that's the tragedy. We are not the Siddhas. Not yet. We're still in the part of the story where we mistake ancient wisdom for poetic fantasy. Where we laugh at flying machines in scripture, while building drones that kill from 3,000 miles away. Where we think flight is progress, but forget that flight was once a memory. So maybe the question isn't were Vimanas real? Maybe the question is how many times have we already flown? And forgotten? And what else have we built since long ago before the fall? Like a temple that wasn't built at all, but summoned. From the top of a mountain, down. The twin suns in the Mahabharata. Some stories burn brighter than others, not because they're more dramatic, but because they carry something else inside them, something contradictory, something that flickers between symbol and fact, metaphor and memory, and sometimes that flicker gets literal. Like the day India had two suns. Yes, that's a thing. Buried inside the Mahabharatan epic, already crammed with god weapons, flying machines, blood feuds, and philosophical duelsis, a moment that makes everyone from astrophysicists to metaphysicists pause mid-sentence. A scene where the sky holds not one but two blazing suns. Here's the direct quote from the Drona Parva, one of the war-centric books of the Mahabharata. There appeared in the sky 2 suns, and many blazing comets fell. The earth shook and roared, the rivers reversed their course, and the fires burnt without fuel. This isn't your standard poetic imagery. This is cosmic disaster journalism. The description is absurdly detailed anomalous sky phenomena, disoriented nature, unnatural heat, seismic rumblings all converging around a moment of war, wrath, and revelation. A moment when reality hiccups. And if we're taking the Mahabharata seriously at all, and we should, because it's increasingly proving to be less myth and more encrypted memory, then this moment deserves attention. So, what the hell were the twin suns? There are theories. Some say it was a supernova star dying in a neighboring system, briefly visible in the daytime sky. Plausible. Supernovae can shine as brightly as the sun for a few days, even weeks, before fading. Chinese records from antiquity mention similar events, guest stars, that appeared and then disappeared. But there's a problem. Supernovae leave a trace. A nebula, a footprint, a pulsar. We can scan ancient sky events backward, using stellar cartography and isotopic remnants. And nothing from the timeline of the Mahabharata roughly 3000, 1500 BCE, depending on who's arguing matches the double sun signature. Others suggest a comet, a particularly reflective one near perihelion close enough to the Earth and Sunday that it appeared as a second bright object. Again, plausible. But comets come with tails. Not glowing, perfect orbs. And the Mahabharata clearly distinguishes between two suns and blazing comets. Then comes the meteor impact theory, that the sun was a fireball, a cosmic object entering the atmosphere and burning brighter than the sun temporarily. Possible. But what object burns long enough to appear stationary in the sky like the sun does? None. So we turn to the weirder stuff. Theories that live where science frowns and old priests nod. Theory 1. A binary star system. That our Sunday, Sol, once had a companion another star. Smaller, darker, dubbed Nemesis by speculative astrophysicists. The idea is ancient, mirrored in myths from Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and Mesoamerica. A second sun, hidden, returning cyclically to wreak gravitational havoc. The Mahabharata, in this view, is a survivor's log from the last pass. Some astrophysicists haven't entirely ruled out Nemesis. Its orbit, if it exists, could be so long tens of thousands of years that its appearances mark the ends of cycles. Mass extinctions, seismic events, collapsing cities, mythological resets. Sound familiar? In the Mahabharata, the twin suns appear right before the Kurukshetra War, a cosmic-scale civil war framed as the end of an Aratha Kali Yuga. The Age of Darkness begins after the war. So if the twin suns are real, they're not just anomalies. They're heralds. There's also the plasma discharge theory, a fringe but strangely compelling model in which planetary bodies in near contact create massive arcs of energy visible in the sky. Think auroras on steroids. Electrical storms spanning the upper atmosphere, two celestial bodies, maybe the Earth, and a massive comet locked in a temporary, terrifying dance. The kind of dance that might look like a second sun from the ground. In this model, ancient epics like the Mahabharata aren't myth. They're misunderstood electrical phenomena reports. Vivid, terrifying, unforgettable. Another explanation? A Vimana, or something worse. Some say the second sun wasn't astronomical, it was technological. A floating craft, bright enough to rival the sun. Maybe a weapon, maybe a god's chariot. Maybe the Brahmastra, the ancient nuke described in the Mahabharata mid-deployment. In this version, the two suns are the sun and the detonation. A sky fire that blinds, sears, and rips the earth. The rest of the description: earthquakes, rivers reversing, trees burning without fuel matches, modern descriptions of nuclear fallout. But how does that sit in a 3,000-year-old text? Uncomfortably. Which brings us to the question we keep skirting. Did the ancients witness something we're still not ready to understand? Because twin suns aren't just rare. They're existential. They challenge the uniqueness of our sun, the stability of our solar system, the safety of our sky. And across cultures, twin sun myths mean one thing: endings. In Norse myth, it's the sky wolves catching the sun and moon. In Mesoamerica, it's the fifth Sunday being devoured. In Hindu cosmology, it's the start of the Kali Yugathe great cosmic downgrade. So what did they see? What stood in the sky, next to the sun, long enough to burn into scripture? The Mahabharata doesn't say, it just reports, factually, almost coldly. 2 suns. Then war. Then darkness. And in that darkness, something worse than God's or monsters' memory. Because here's the real horror of the twin suns. Not that they appeared once, but that they might come back. That we're not in a safe, stable solar system, but in a loop, a cycle, a countdown. And that the ancients, those who built temples without tools, flew without engines, wrote scriptures that still make physicists sweat, left us warnings, not metaphors. They weren't confused primitives. They were survivors. And maybe the 2 suns weren't a beginning. Maybe they were a reboot, which brings us to another system that doesn't lie. Not mythology, not the sky, but time itself. A calendar so precise, so impossibly advanced, that it doesn't measure minutes or days. It measures epochs. And it's been running for over 24,000 years. The 24,000-year calendar of the Vedas. Most calendars are simple lies we tell ourselves to stay sane. A loop of boxes, a sequence of seasons, a digital chirp reminding us we're late for something. Our Gregorian calendar arbitrary, imperial, solar centricis, a patchwork of edits layered over Roman gods and papal compromises. We trust it not because it's perfect, but because everyone else does. But the Vedic calendar? That one doesn't play by those rules. Because it's not a calendar. It's a cosmic mechanism that tracks not days or months, but reality itself. The Vedas, India's oldest sacred texts, don't just tell stories or prayers. They describe time. Obsessively. Mathematically. With a precision that should be impossible for a culture that, according to modern historians, was still developing agriculture. Let's set the stage. The Vedas describe time in yugas, vast epochs that stretch across tens of thousands, even millions of years. The 4 primary ones are Satya Yuga, the age of truth, 1,728,000 years. Treta Yuga, 1,296,000 years. Dvapara Yuga, 864,000 years. Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, which we're allegedly in now, 432,000 years. That alone should raise eyebrows. Because those numbers, they're not random. They're precise mathematical ratios, multiples of 432, a number that turns up like a recurring glitch in the matrix. The Earth's diameter is approximately 7,920 miles, equals 432 times 18.33. The Sun's radius is approximately 432,000 miles. There are 86,400 seconds in a day, equals 432 times 200. The average human breathes 21,600 times per day, equals 432 times 50. It's as if the Vedic sages weren't just guessing, they were measuring something fundamental. Now here's where it gets wild. Beyond the mythological yugas, the Vedic tradition also describes a 24,000-year cycle known as the precession of the equinoxes, a slow wobble in the Earth's axis that shifts the position of constellations over time. Modern astronomy confirms this. The Earth completes a full axial precession every approximately 25,772 years. The Vedas round it to 24,000 and break it into 2 halves, an upward and downward arc, like inhales and exhales of cosmic consciousness. This is not primitive astrology. This is sidereal astrophysics, before telescopes. The concept comes through strongest in texts like the Surya Siddhanta, an astronomical treatise dated, conservatively, to 500 CE, though many believe it preserves much older oral traditions. The text calculates the length of a sidereal year, the time it takes Earth to orbit the Sun relative to fixed stars with an error margin of just 1.4 seconds compared to today's value. Let that sit with you. A 1,500-year-old text, with no known observatories, 0 telescopes, and no satellites, nails the mechanics of our solar system to the second. So who were these people? How did they know? And what were they measuring? According to some scholars, fringe ones, sure, but increasingly relevant, the 24,000-year cycle corresponds not just to stellar drift, but to consciousness drift. The theory posits that humanity passes through rising and falling phases of awareness, intelligence, and spiritual connection. It's a cosmic sine wave of evolution and entropy. In the upward arc, we become more aligned with truth, reason, empathy. In the downward arc, we collapse into chaos, delusion, and materialism. Sound familiar? The Kali Yuga, current age is the lowest point in the cycle. An era where virtue is reduced to 1/4 of its former strength, where corruption thrives, truth decays, and technology outpaces wisdom. Where humanity forgets what it once knew. A lot of cultures describe a golden age. Only the Vedic system quantifies its return. Let's look at the dates. According to modern interpretations like those proposed by Swami Sri Yukteswar in the 19th century, we're already past the worst. He recalculated the Yuga cycle not as millions of years, but as symbolic of a 12,000-year decline and 12,000-year ascent tied directly to axial precession. Under this model, the Kali Yuga ended in 1700 CE, and we are now in the ascending Dvapara Yugan age of rediscovery, which would explain a lot. Electricity, quantum physics, genetics, AI, spaceflight. We've crammed more technological evolution into the last 300 years than in the previous 3,000. According to the Vedic cycle, we're regaining what we once lost not discovering it. It's not progress. It's recollection. But recollection of what? There's a line from the Rig Veda. 7 are the wheels of the chariot, drawn by one horse with 7 names. For centuries, people thought it was poetry. Now it's suspiciously close to the modern model of the electromagnetic spectrum, or even quantum field theory, a single unified energy expressed in 7 vibrational modes. And remember, the Vedas don't just track the Earth. They describe the positions and velocities of planets, lunar phases, eclipse patterns, solstices, equinoxes, everything, without observatories, without metal instruments, without error. Maybe they had something else. Memory. Some believe the Vedic calendar is a remnant of a lost, high civilization pre-Ice Age, pre-cataclysm, the cultural source from which Sumerians, Egyptians, and even Mesoamericans drew fragmented echoes. A civilization that didn't build skyscrapers or factories, but knew how to read the stars and time itself. What if they encoded that knowledge into rhythm? Because that's the real genius of the Vedic calendar. It's not static. It doesn't just count time, it sings it. Through mantras, through rituals, through resonant harmonics tied to planetary cycles. Knowledge was stored in sound, in vibration, in repetition, which, ironically, makes it indestructible. You can burn a book. You can destroy a temple. But you can't kill a song. And that's what the Yuga's area Song of Time, looping across millennia, waiting to be remembered. And we are remembering, slowly, stupidly, through trial and error, through science that rediscovers what sages once listened to. And maybe that's why, when we see ancient stone carvings of wheels, mandalas, or cosmograms, we think ritual. But what we're really seeing is a clock, and it's ticking. So maybe this isn't the beginning of a technological age. Maybe it's the comeback tour of a civilization that never really died. And if that's true, then we must ask, what else have they left for us to remember? Maybe a clue carved into a wall, not written in ink but in geometry, in size, in impossible precision. An ancient machine, not built to fly, but to count the stars. And maybe to tell us when to try again. The Jantar Mantar astronomical devices. From a distance, it looks like a brutalist playground. Abstract stone arcs, sloping staircases to nowhere, walls tilted at odd angles. It doesn't look ancient. It doesn't even look functional. It looks like something an avant-garde sculptor might have built after 3 espressos and a head injury. But this is Jantar Mantar. And it's not art. It's a machine. Scattered across India and Jaipur, Delhi, Varanasi, Ujjain, and Mathurare, 5 massive structures built in the early 18th century by Maharaja Jai Singh II, a man who loved astronomy more than politics and geometry more than war. He was a king. Yes, but he was also a data obsessive. A man who looked at the night sky and saw not myth, but math. And he built monuments to prove it. Except they weren't monuments. They were calculators, stone-built analog computers the size of houses, capable of measuring time, plotting planetary positions, predicting eclipses, and tracking celestial alignments with terrifying accuracy. But here's the catch. No one knows how he did it. Because these weren't random sundials or giant compasses. They were calibrated to absurd levels of precision, up to 2-second accuracy in telling local solar time. With stone, no computers, no GPS. Just marble and muscle and knowledge that, according to textbooks, shouldn't have existed in the 1700s. Which makes the story harder to believe. Let's talk about the Samrat Yantra. In Jaipur, it rises like a slice of a sun god's blade, 73 feet tall, inclined at exactly 27 degrees to match the city's latitude. It's not decorative. It's a giant equinoctial sundiala device that measures time by casting shadows. Except unlike a pocket sundial, this one reads time with down-to-the-second accuracy, using nothing more than the sun and stone. Engineers have studied it. Architects have tried to replicate its scale. Most fail, because this thing doesn't just measure time. It's synchronized to celestial movement, aligning with the Earth's rotation, orbital tilt, and solar declination. It's a physical ephemera zone that's still accurate 3 centuries later. Now, multiply that idea across dozens of other instruments. The Jai Prakash Yantra, a hollow bowl that maps the celestial sphere and shows the positions of stars at any given time. The Rama Yantra, a vertical column surrounded by concentric circles, used to measure the altitude and azimuth of celestial bodies. The Misra Yantra, a device that determines the shortest and longest days of the year and pinpoints the exact moment of noon in multiple cities simultaneously. No moving parts. No gears. Just geometry. But here's where things get strange. The official history says Jai Singh built these to update Islamic astronomical tables. Fair enough. He was influenced by Persian, Arab, and Hindu sources. He had access to the best minds of his time. But even with that, how did he design instruments so massive, so perfectly oriented, and so durably precise that modern astronomers still use them to calibrate telescopes? Where did the base data come from? Where did he get the formulas? Because the Vedic texts he referenced, the Surya Siddhanta, Brahmasputa Siddhanta, and Aryabhatiya, already contained mind-blowing mathematical insights. The Earth's circumference calculated with less than 1% error, a heliocentric model centuries before Copernicus. The concept of zero as a number, trigonometric functions and sine tables, eclipse predictions accurate to hours. And that's 1,000 years before Jai Singh. So again, what exactly was Jai Singh doing? Maybe he wasn't innovating. Maybe he was restoring. There's a recurring theory in Indian historical cycles that knowledge is cyclical, not linear, that every age ends in loss, and every new age rediscovers what the old ones already knew. Jantar Mantar, in this view, wasn't revolutionary. It was archaeological, an attempt to reconstitute a forgotten toolkit. Jai Singh wasn't inventing, he was decoding, and he might have succeeded. Because the instruments do something else, something subtle. They tune space. Spend time there, especially in Jaipur, especially during a solstice, and you start to feel it. The angles, the vibrations, the resonance of shadow and silence. It's not spiritual in the incense swinging sense. It's acoustic, electromagnetic. Something vibrates in the stone itself, as if the devices are harmonizing with the sky. That's not science. That's engineering sorcery. Some researchers have proposed that these instruments aren't just astronomical, they're resonant structures, amplifying specific frequencies from solar radiation or Schumann resonance, the Earth's low-frequency EM hum. Others go further, suggesting that Jantar Mantar is a ground-based calendar machine, like a stone processor taking celestial input and generating not just data, but rhythms, cosmological music. A calendar you don't read, you stand inside and listen. Now we're getting close to something ancient. A time before telescopes, before paper, when knowledge wasn't written, it was inhabited. When a priest didn't consult chart, she stood in a structure tuned to the stars and simply felt the answer. This isn't woo. This is what we're rediscovering with quantum sensors and photonic crystals. That reality is structured in vibration, that time and space are interactive. And maybe, just maybe, Jantar Mantar was a prototype for how to experience time without devices. A stone algorithm. And then there's the kicker. Jai Singh left no personal records about how he designed the instruments. No diary, no calculations, no blueprints, nothing. As if he didn't need to, as if he was simply remembering, channeling, reconstructing an operating system his ancestors used long before history was written down. And if that's true, then what else was he trying to rebuild? Because timekeeping is never just about time. It's about ritual, agriculture, war, resurrection. It's about knowing when to act. And maybe that's why these devices still work. Because time hasn't changed. Only we have. And if we've forgotten how to read the stars, maybe the stars haven't forgotten us. Maybe they're waiting for us to look up and remember. Just like the temple stones. Just like the sacred seals. Just like the ancient script that stares back at us from pottery shards and broken walls. Unreadable. Undefeated. And still refusing to speak. The repeating symbols of the Indus Valley script. You stare at it like it's about to blink. Line after line of tiny carvings etched into soapstone, terracotta, and copper tablets. Abstract, compact, repetitive, and utterly silent. It's not a language you can hear, not one you can even fake your way through. It doesn't resemble Sanskrit, or Tamil, or any known Indo-European language. It doesn't care about your Rosetta Stones or your decipherment theories. It just sits there, watching, judging. This is the Indus Valley script. And it is, without question, one of the greatest unresolved linguistic mysteries of human civilization. The Indus Valley civilization, or Harappan civilization, if you're on formal terms, was one of the earliest urban societies on Earth, contemporary with Egypt and Mesopotamia. Between 2600 and 1900 BCE, they built cities with indoor plumbing, grid-patterned streets, standardized weights, multi-story homes, and a trading network that stretched from Sumeria to Gujarat. They also left behind thousands of inscriptions on seals, on pottery, on tools, on amulets, on walls. About 4,000 examples have been found to date. Some contain just a few characters. Others stretch across multiple lines. Most are bafflingly consistent. and none of them have been definitively decoded. Not one. That's not for lack of trying. Every year, some new scholar steps forward claiming they've cracked the code. They use statistical models, AI pattern recognition, or linguistic reverse engineering. Theories pile up. It's Proto, Dravidian. It's a logo, syllabic system. It's a rebus code. It's a ritual language. It's not a language at all. But the script remains impervious. Because here's the twist. The script doesn't behave like anything else we've ever seen. It doesn't follow the phonetic rules of alphabets. It doesn't exhibit the character repetition of known syllabaries. It doesn't evolve over time, and the inscriptions are too short, usually 5 to 7 characters long, to apply standard decryption techniques. It's like trying to read a text message from someone who only ever types emojis. And that's one theory, actually, that the Indus symbols weren't meant to be read aloud but interpreted visually, that they functioned like ideograms conveying entire ideas or categories rather than specific words or phonemes. Kind of like traffic signs or religious icons? Not a language in the traditional sense, but a cognitive interface. Which would make the Harappans not illiterate but post-literate. People who opted out of writing as we understand it. Wrap your head around that. The possibility that the oldest literate civilization on the Indian subcontinent invented a script and then used it to avoid language. Then there's the other possibility. That the script is a cipher knot. A system for communication, but a code meant only for insiders. In this view, each symbol isn't a word or a syllable, it's a trigger, a mnemonic. A key to a knowledge system passed down orally, rituals, chants, philosophical concepts. In other words, the writing doesn't say anything on its own. It's a password for the initiated, which is exactly what some Vedic traditions suggest. The Vedas were never written down for thousands of years. Their transmission was entirely oral sonic precision passed from master to disciple. A spoken technology. If the Indus script is tied to this knowledge lineage, then it wouldn't be about syntax or grammar. It would be about access. But maybe the most disturbing possibility is the simplest. We're not supposed to understand it. Maybe the script was built to be contextual, tied to a worldview that we've completely lost. A cosmology. A ritual logic. A way of being in the world that no longer exists. The grammar of a civilization that didn't write to store data but to tune space. Let's look at the symbols. Some resemble fish, others tridents, trees, squares, circles. But they're not literal. They repeat in patterns, like motifs in a musical scale. And they often appear next to animal figures, unicorns, bulls, elephants each, carved with surreal precision, often surrounded by abstract glyphs that seem to reference something deeper. What were these? Religious codes? Trade documents? Spellbooks? Maybe all of the above. Maybe none. Because we don't even know the sounds behind the script, which makes it, technically, not a lost language, but a mute one. And yet, it persists. Thousands of seals, all saying something, or maybe just thinking it. One famous seal, M414, if you're into catalog number, shows a humanoid figure in a yogic posture, surrounded by animals. Scholars call him the Pashupati seal, possibly the protoform of Shiva. If true, then that's the oldest known representation of yoga. Not a story. Not a doctrine. A symbol, designed to bypass speech. And that might be the point. That the Indus script was never meant for communication, but for activation. A semiotic switchboard. A library of sacred forms, the kind you don't read, but contemplate. The kind that change you, not your inbox. That theoresoteric sure lines up with certain tantric philosophies, where form is vibration and meaning is secondary. A yantra isn't a diagram, it's a portal. A mantra isn't a sentence. It's a frequency. In that world, writing isn't a tool. It's a weapon, or a door, or a lock. So maybe we're approaching the Indus script all wrong, trying to read it like modern linguists when it was built by mystics and architects and engineers of symbolic structure. A few researchers have tried looking at the seals not as language but as code, binary pairs, logic gates, compressed data sets. One group even proposed the script as a genetic model mapping symbol sequences onto biological algorithms. Sounds crazy? So does a rust-proof iron pillar. So does a temple carved downward from a mountain. So does a 24,000-year clock. And yet here we are, staring at thousands of signs that defy not only interpretation, but our very idea of what language is supposed to be. What if the Indus people were speaking to something besides each other? To the earth? To the sky? To whatever lives between vibration and silence? Because symbols don't just represent, they shape, they hold, they contain. And maybe some symbols don't want to be known. Not yet. Because what happens when we finally crack the Indus script? What happens when the silence ends? What truths come loose? What ancient trauma reboots? Maybe it's not a question of if we'll understand it, but whether we'll be able to handle what it says. Because words have power. And some languages are better left unread, especially if they speak of secrets buried not just in stone, but in law. Edicts that warned us where not to go. And what would happen if we did? The repeating symbols of the Indus Valley script, you stare at it like it's about to blink. Line after line of tiny carvings etched into soapstone, terracotta, and copper tablets. Abstract, compact, repetitive, and utterly silent. It's not a language you can hear, not one you can even fake your way through. It doesn't resemble Sanskrit, or Tamil, or any known Indo-European language. It doesn't care about your Rosetta Stones or your decipherment theories. It just sits there, watching, judging. This is the Indus Valley script, and it is, without question, one of the greatest unresolved linguistic mysteries of human civilization. The Indus Valley civilization, or Harappan civilization, if you're on formal terms, was one of the earliest urban societies on Earth, contemporary with Egypt and Mesopotamia. Between 2600 and 1900 BCE, they built cities with indoor plumbing, grid-patterned streets, standardized weights, multi-story homes, and a trading network that stretched from Sumeria to Gujarat. They also left behind thousands of inscriptions on seals, on pottery, on tools, on amulets, on walls. About 4,000 examples have been found to date. Some contain just a few characters. Others stretch across multiple lines. Most are bafflingly consistent, and none of them have been definitively decoded. Not one. That's not for lack of trying. Every year, some new scholar steps forward claiming they've cracked the code. They use statistical models, AI pattern recognition, or linguistic reverse engineering. Theories pile up. It's Proto-Dravidian. It's a logo, syllabic system. It's a rebus code. It's a ritual language. It's not a language at all. But the script remains impervious. Because here's the twist. The script doesn't behave like anything else we've ever seen. It doesn't follow the phonetic rules of alphabets. It doesn't exhibit the character repetition of known syllabaries. It doesn't evolve over time, and the inscriptions are too short, usually 5 to 7 characters long, to apply standard decryption techniques. It's like trying to read a text message from someone who only ever types emojis. And that's one theory, actually, that the Indus symbols weren't meant to be read aloud but interpreted visually, that they functioned like ideograms conveying entire ideas or categories rather than specific words or phonemes. Kind of like traffic signs or religious icons. Not a language in the traditional sense, but a cognitive interface. Which would make the Harappans not illiterate but post-literate. People who opted out of writing as we understand it. Wrap your head around that. The possibility that the oldest literate civilization on the Indian subcontinent invented a script and then used it to avoid language. Then there's the other possibility. That the script is a cipher knot, a system for communication, but a code meant only for insiders. In this view, each symbol isn't a word or a syllable, it's a trigger, a mnemonic. A key to a knowledge system passed down orally, rituals, chants, philosophical concepts. In other words, the writing doesn't say anything on its own. It's a password for the initiated, which is exactly what some Vedic traditions suggest. The Vedas were never written down for thousands of years. Their transmission was entirely oral sonic precision passed from master to disciple. A spoken technology. If the Indus script is tied to this knowledge lineage, then it wouldn't be about syntax or grammar. It would be about access. But maybe the most disturbing possibility is the simplest. We're not supposed to understand it. Maybe the script was built to be contextual, tied to a worldview that we've completely lost. A cosmology. A ritual logic. A way of being in the world that no longer exists. The grammar of a civilization that didn't write to store data but to tune space. Let's look at the symbols. Some resemble fish, others tridents, trees, squares, circles. But they're not literal. They repeat in patterns, like motifs in a musical scale. And they often appear next to animal figures, unicorns, bulls, elephants, each carved with surreal precision, often surrounded by abstract glyphs that seem to reference something deeper. What were these? Religious codes? Trade documents? Spellbooks? Maybe all of the above. Maybe none. Because we don't even know the sounds behind the script, which makes it, technically, not a lost language, but a mute one. And yet, it persists. Thousands of seals, all saying something, or maybe just thinking it. One famous seal, M414, if you're into catalog number, shows a humanoid figure in a yogic posture, surrounded by animals. Scholars call him the Pashupati seal, possibly the protoform of Shiva. If true, then that's the oldest known representation of yoga. Not a story, not a doctrine, a symbol designed to bypass speech. And that might be the point, that the Indus script was never meant for communication, but for activation. A semiotic switchboard. A library of sacred forms, the kind you don't read, but contemplate. The kind that change you, not your inbox. That theoresoteric sure lines up with certain tantric philosophies, where form is vibration and meaning is secondary. A yantra isn't a diagram, it's a portal. A mantra isn't a sentence. It's a frequency. In that world, writing isn't a tool. It's a weapon. Or a door. Or a lock. So maybe we're approaching the Indus script all wrong, trying to read it like modern linguists when it was built by mystics and architects and engineers of symbolic structure. A few researchers have tried looking at the seals not as language but as code, binary pairs, logic gates, compressed data sets. One group even proposed the script as a genetic model, mapping symbol sequences onto biological algorithms. Sounds crazy? So does a rust-proof iron pillar. So does a temple carved downward from a mountain. So does a 24,000-year clock. And yet here we are, staring at thousands of signs that defy not only interpretation, but our very idea of what language is supposed to be. What if the Indus people were speaking to something besides each other? To the earth? To the sky? To whatever lives between vibration and silence? Because symbols don't just represent, they shape, they hold, they contain. And maybe some symbols don't want to be known. Not yet. Because what happens when we finally crack the Indus script? What happens when the silence ends? What truths come loose? What ancient trauma reboots? Maybe it's not a question of if we'll understand it, but whether we'll be able to handle what it says. Because words have power, and some languages are better left unread, especially if they speak of secrets buried not just in stone, but in law. Edicts that warned us where not to go. And what would happen if we did? The Brahmastra weapon descriptions. Some stories are too big to be stories. They're too detailed, too literal, too wrong to be fiction. They don't behave like myths. They behave like eyewitness reports written by people trying to explain something so far outside their comprehension that the only option was poetry. And that's exactly how the Brahmastra enters the room. Not with a whisper, but with a mushroom cloud. Let's start with the basics. In the Mahabharata, one of the longest and oldest epic poems in the world, there are numerous accounts of divine weapon celestial tools wielded by heroes and gods alike. Most are metaphorical: arrows made of fire, spears of ice, lightning bolts hurled by angry sky, dwellers, standard mythological fare. And then there's the Brahmastra. This one is different. Described as the weapon of Brahma, the creator god, the Brahmastra is single-use, apocalyptic, and so devastating that even its users are terrified to invoke it. It is said to release a column of fire as bright as 10,000 suns, capable of burning entire cities to ash and turning the earth itself to glass. Its effects? Radiation, infertility, poisoned rivers, blindness, death by invisible force. It was as if all the elements had been unleashed. Birds fell from the sky, waters boiled, elephants screamed and ran in circles, the unborn died in the womb. That's not an epic. That's a blast radius report. The Mahabharata isn't subtle about this. When the Brahmastra is used specifically in the final war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, consequences are catastrophic. And when two are nearly launched at once, Krishna himself intervenes to prevent the earth from being annihilated. Because that's how dangerous this thing is. Not a weapon of battle, but a reset button. Not a missile, but an extinction-level event. Now let's entertain a blasphemous question. What if the Brahmastra wasn't fiction? Let's say, just for a moment, that these ancient texts are not allegories but encoded records. That the weapons described in the Mahabharata Brahmastra, Narayanastra, Agniastra aren't mystical metaphors, but technologies. Then what we're reading is not mythology. It's post-apocalyptic science fiction written in the tone of sacred history. Which raises another question. Where did these weapons come from? The Mahabharata is frustratingly specific and maddeningly vague. The weapons are divine, granted through mantra, focus, and moral qualification. They are called down, not forged. But once used, they function like machines. The Brahmastra targets a specific individual or area, releases blinding light and heat, causes long-term contamination, renders regions uninhabitable for generations, can be neutralized, but only by another equally powerful counterweapon. Let's compare that to a thermonuclear bomb. Precision targeting, massive blast wave and thermal radiation, fallout that poisons land and water, genetic damage, and increased cancer risk for survivors. Potential for mutual destruction if more than one is deployed. And the most chilling alignment? The psychological burden. Even in modern times, nuclear warfare is framed as unthinkable, a line you don't cross, a tool you never actually use. That exact sentiment appears in the Mahabharata again and again. The Brahmastra is not a glorious weapon. It is a curse. And even those who wield it, Arjuna, Ashwatthama, so with hesitation, they know what it does. Or more disturbingly, they remember. Which opens a third, darker theory. What if the Brahmastra wasn't invented in the Mahabharata timeline? What if it was left over? A relic from a previous age, something inherited, not created. a kind of mythological black box passed down from a collapsed epoch, its function remembered, but its origin forgotten. There's precedent for this in the text. Ancient seers speak of weapons no longer used. Ashwatthama, cursed with immortality, is said to have unleashed the Brahmastra in desperation, not knowing how to fully control it. Krishna himself intervenes to contain its effects, not with a counter-missile but with consciousness. This isn't war. It's damage control from a technological accident. And here's the part no one talks about. India has actual archaeological sites where the soil has been fused into glass. The radiation levels are inexplicably elevated, and the surrounding areas show signs of intense heat exposure with no volcanic activity. One of the most cited examples? Mohenjo-Daro. Once a thriving city of the Indus Valley civilization, Mohenjo-Daro was abandoned suddenly. Some skeletons found there show radioactive contamination beyond what's expected from natural background levels. The city layout shows signs of an explosion epicenter. Walls melted, bricks vitrified. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe not. Ancient astronaut theorists, yes. Them again suggest the Mahabharata is the memory of a planetary civil war, one fought with skycraft, vimanas, and energy-based weapons, astra, in which the Brahmastra was a doomsday device. Even more conservative scholars admit the parallels are disturbing. Carl Sagan once referenced the Vedic texts in his lectures, noting their cosmic timelines and descriptions of technology. Robert Oppenheimer, father of the atomic bomb, famously quoted the Gita after the Trinity test. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." But what he said in private is even more interesting. When asked by a student whether the first atomic bomb test was the first time such a weapon had been detonated, he replied, "Well, yes, in modern times." Modern. That one word turns the Brahmastra from fiction into possibility. And maybe that's what terrifies us most. Not that the ancients had technology, but that we're repeating their mistakes. Because every society that invents a god weapon thinks they can control it, that they're morally superior, that this time will be different. And every time, the weapon outlasts the war. So maybe the Brahmastra wasn't divine. Maybe it was left behind. A relic, a lesson. One we didn't understand the first time. One we're still trying to recreate, buried under bunkers and NDA-classified laboratories. But here's the final twist. Some ancient texts claim that the Brahmastra wasn't just a weapon. It was a thought form, a resonance, a concentration of intention so powerful, it rewrote matter. In that view, the weapon doesn't need uranium. It needs consciousness. A mind honed into a singularity, a mantra keyed to atomic collapse. That's not science fiction. That's quantum mechanics with a scriptural twist. And it means the real weapon isn't the Astra, it's the user. So maybe the Brahmastra wasn't what we lost. Maybe it's what we're becoming. And maybe that's why some doors were sealed. Why some temples hide nothingness. Why, in one strange place in Tamil Nadu, behind a curtain, something sacred is hidden in silence. A secret they still refuse to show you. The mirror of the Mysore Palace. There's a room in the Mysore Palace they don't show you. Not on the official tour. Not on the audio guide. Not even in the whispered footnotes of your most obsessive travel blogs. It's a room hidden behind layered doors, sealed to the public, guarded not by alarms or cameras, but by absence. What's inside? A mirror. At least, that's the story. A mirror that doesn't behave like one. It doesn't reflect. It doesn't break. It doesn't warp. It just shows exactly what no one agrees on. This is the story of the unbreakable mirror of Mysorea royal artifact, so strange, so deeply unnerving that it's been buried beneath layers of official denial and whispered recollection. There's no inventory listing, no photograph, no provenance trail, just echoes. Let's reconstruct the fragments. The legend goes like this. At some point in the late 18th or early 19th century, during the height of the Wodeyar dynasty's power, a gift arrived at the Mysore court. Some say it came from Persia. Others say it was smuggled from Tibet. Still, others claim it wasn't gifted at all, but discovered sealed in an ancient temple vault, locked behind mantras no one could translate. Whatever the source, the item was clear. A mirror, unlike anything seen before, forged from an unknown alloy, surface perfectly flat, disturbingly flat. Not polished metal, not glass. Something else. Something that didn't reflect light so much as it absorbed awareness. People didn't see their faces in it. They saw themselves. Not metaphorically. Literally. Not the you show the world. The other you. It was said that the mirror could see through time. That if you stared long enough, you'd catch flickers of past lives, future regrets, suppressed memories, or things not meant to be seen at all. Some palace staff went mad after glimpsing it. Others went mute. The Maharaja himself, upon looking into the mirror, reportedly withdrew from court for 9 days and returned, changed, quiet, skeptical, lighter somehow, as if a burden had been lifted or, perhaps, transferred. What did he see? He never said. But the mirror was quietly locked away soon after. And the room? Sealed. The official record? Non-existent. The royal archivists refer to it only as Specimen 13, and even that label vanished after independence. Today, the room is there but empty on blueprints. No entry on fire maps, no ventilation. Just a sealed chamber, behind a sealed chamber, behind another room no one's allowed to question. But here's the problem. Everyone remembers it differently. Some say the mirror reflected people as animals, others as corpses, others as children they never were, or gods they used to worship. Some say the mirror showed a world where you never made that one terrible mistake. Others say it showed you making worse ones. One tale claims the mirror spoke not aloud, but directly into your mind. And what it said was always true. That's what makes it terrifying. Not that it lied, but that it didn't. Let's get weirder. Recent forensic scans of the palace dome quietly as part of earthquake-proofing renovations revealed an anomalous heat signature in the area believed to house the mirror. The room is sealed, lightless, yet registers ambient energy emissions. Some speculate it's natural radon decay, geothermal variance, or poorly mapped wiring. Others suggest something more exotic, that the mirror isn't just an object, it's a device, designed to reflect, not photons, but consciousness. What does that even mean? Let's go, quantum. In certain interpretations of quantum theories, especially those involving the observer effect, consciousness plays a role in collapsing probability into reality. Observation creates the world. Now imagine a mirror tuned not to reflect what your eyes see, but what your mind manifests. A quantum psychological feedback loop. You don't see your face, you see your collapse function. You see yourself as you truly are. Or worse, as you might have been. That would explain the reactions, the madness, the silence. Because most of us can handle lies. But the truth raw, unfiltered, cosmic in scale, that's the real horror. And what if the mirror was never meant for humans? What if it was part of something older? A piece of a machine? A relic from an age where self-recognition was a technology used to initiate the soul, to cleanse trauma, to reset karmic cycles? A mirror that doesn't flatter, doesn't filter, doesn't forgive, just shows. And that might explain why it was locked away. Because once seen and truly seen, you can't go back. You're either free or broken. That duality, the blade edge between liberation and lunasias, the real power of the mirror of Mysore. And maybe the reason no one's dared move it. Because it's not a mirror. It's a question. One so sharp, it cuts the illusion from the self. And once the illusion dies, you stop asking who you are. You start asking what's next. What other stories were we told that weren't stories at all? What other beings once walked among us? Like that strange king from the legends. The one who left came back and found centuries had passed. The mirror of the Mysore Palace. There's a room in the Mysore Palace they don't show you. Not on the official tour, not on the audio guide, not even in the whispered footnotes of your most obsessive travel blogs. It's a room hidden behind layered doors, sealed to the public, guarded not by alarms or cameras, but by absence. What's inside? A mirror. At least, that's the story. A mirror that doesn't behave like one. It doesn't reflect. It doesn't break. It doesn't warp. It just shows exactly what no one agrees on. This is the story of the unbreakable mirror of Mysorea royal artifact, so strange, so deeply unnerving that it's been buried beneath layers of official denial and whispered recollection. There's no inventory listing, no photograph, no provenance trail, just echoes. Let's reconstruct the fragments. The legend goes like this. At some point in the late 18th or early 19th century, during the height of the Wodeyar dynasty's power, a gift arrived at the Mysore court. Some say it came from Persia. Others say it was smuggled from Tibet. Still, others claim it wasn't gifted at all, but discovered sealed in an ancient temple vault, locked behind mantras no one could translate. Whatever the source, the item was clear. A mirror, unlike anything seen before, forged from an unknown alloy, surface perfectly flat, disturbingly flat. Not polished metal, not glass. Something else. Something that didn't reflect light so much as it absorbed awareness. People didn't see their faces in it. They saw themselves. Not metaphorically. Literally. Not the you show the world. The other you. It was said that the mirror could see through time. That if you stared long enough, you'd catch flickers of past lives, future regrets, suppressed memories, or things not meant to be seen at all. Some palace staff went mad after glimpsing it. Others went mute. The Maharaja himself, upon looking into the mirror, reportedly withdrew from court for 9 days and returned, changed, quiet, skeptical, lighter somehow, as if a burden had been lifted or, perhaps, transferred. What did he see? He never said, but the mirror was quietly locked away soon after. And the room? Sealed? The official record? Non-existent. The royal archivists refer to it only as Specimen 13, and even that label vanished after independence. Today, the room is there but empty on blueprints. No entry on fire maps, no ventilation. Just a sealed chamber, behind a sealed chamber, behind another room no one's allowed to question. But here's the problem. Everyone remembers it differently. Some say the mirror reflected people as animals, others as corpses, others as children they never were, or gods they used to worship. Some say the mirror showed a world where you never made that one terrible mistake. Others say it showed you making worse ones. One tale claims the mirror spoke not aloud, but directly into your mind. And what it said was always true. That's what makes it terrifying. Not that it lied, but that it didn't. Let's get weirder. Recent forensic scans of the palace dome quietly as part of earthquake-proofing renovations revealed an anomalous heat signature in the area believed to house the mirror. The room is sealed, lightless, yet registers ambient energy emissions. Some speculate it's natural radon decay, geothermal variance, or poorly mapped wiring. Others suggest something more exotic, that the mirror isn't just an object, it's a device, designed to reflect, not photons, but consciousness. What does that even mean? Let's go, Quantum. In certain interpretations of quantum theories, especially those involving the observer effect, consciousness plays a role in collapsing probability into reality. Observation creates the world. Now imagine a mirror tuned not to reflect what your eyes see, but what your mind manifests. A quantum psychological feedback loop. You don't see your face, you see your collapse function. You see yourself as you truly are. Or worse, as you might have been. That would explain the reactions, the madness, the silence. Because most of us can handle lies. But the truth raw, unfiltered, cosmic in scale, that's the real horror. And what if the mirror was never meant for humans? What if it was part of something older? A piece of a machine? A relic from an age where self-recognition was a technology used to initiate the soul, to cleanse trauma, to reset karmic cycles? A mirror that doesn't flatter, doesn't filter, doesn't forgive, just shows. And that might explain why it was locked away. Because once seen, truly seen, you can't go back. You're either free or broken. That duality, the blade edge between liberation and lunasias, the real power of the mirror of Mysore. And maybe the reason no one's dared move it. Because it's not a mirror. It's a question. One so sharp, it cuts the illusion from the self. And once the illusion dies, you stop asking who you are. You start asking what's next. What other stories were we told that weren't stories at all? What other beings once walked among us? Like that strange king from the legends. The one who left came back and found centuries had passed. The time dilation legend of Kakudmi. Time is supposed to move forward, equally, relentlessly. It's supposed to tick like a metronome. 1 second, then another. No skipping, no slippage, number tricks. Unless, of course, you believe the story of King Kakudmi. In which case, time is a liar. This legend is tucked deep within the Srimad Bhagavatam, an ancient Sanskrit text, part cosmology, part theology, part psychedelic trip through time and space. It tells the story of a righteous king, Ravata Kakudmi, ruler of the fabled Kushastali, an ancient city said to be more advanced than the kingdoms we read about in our dusty timelines. King Kakudmi had a problem. He wanted the perfect husband for his daughter, Ravati. So what does he do? He doesn't swipe right. He doesn't consult priests. He goes to Brahmalokathe, celestial abode of Brahma. The god of creation asked the creator of the universe himself for matchmaking advice. That's already a flex. But it's what happens next that breaks every rule in your physics textbook. By the time Brahma is finished listening to Kakudmi's request, was allegedly enjoying a cosmic concert by the Gandharvashe, looks at the king and says, essentially, you're too late. In the brief moment that Kakudmi spent in the higher realm, many thousands of years had passed on earth. Entire dynasties had risen and fallen. His city was gone. His people vanished. The landscape had changed. Time, it turns out, runs differently in different realms. Brahma reassures him, tells him not to worry, tells him there's still someone left on earth who can marry Ravati Balarama, brother of Krishna. So the king returns with his daughter, who, to everyone else, has been missing for millennia. But to them, it felt like minutes. This isn't just a myth. It's a textbook example of time dilation. And it gets weirder. When Ravati meets Balarama, she's described as enormous taller than the humans of the current yuga, a remnant of an earlier age. Balarama adjusts her to fit the current epic, shrinking her size, realigning her vibration. It's not just poetic license. It's dimensional recalibration. This story is 3,000 years old, minimum. Einstein's theory of special relativity, which introduced time dilation as a scientific concept, the Bhagavatam beat him by 2.5 millennia. And it's not alone. Multiple ancient Indian texts describe differential time flow. The Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Puranas, again and again, characters ascend to higher realms, spend moments in celestial time, and return to find centuries have passed below. A day of Brahma equals 4.32 billion human years. A night of Brahma equals another 4.32 billion years. 1 year of the gods equals 360 human years. This isn't fantasy. This is scale math. Not just describing time, but how it warps across different reference frames. Which raises a terrifying question. How did they know? How did Iron Age poets, without clocks or satellites or atomic references, intuit a concept that even modern physicists struggle to explain without equations? There are a few possibilities. 1. It's all coincidence, purely symbolic. The ancients were just trying to express the majesty of the gods in big numbers and accidentally stumbled into cosmological truths. Sure. 2. They didn't invent it. They remembered it. From where? That's where it gets dangerous. Because if you follow that thread, you start to see the Vedic cosmology as a map, not a myth. A hierarchy of realms, each with its own time signature, gravitational density, and consciousness bandwidth. What we call dimensions, they called lokas. What we call time dilation, they called divine perspective. And what we call lost civilizations, they described as yuga-cyclical phases in which humanity rises, forgets, collapses, and then rises again. So what happened to Kukudmi's kingdom? Where is Kushastali now? Some say it became Dwaraka, Krishna's golden city. Others say it's under the sea. Still others believe Kukudmi was never human at all. That the story is allegorical, yes, but not for love or duty. For displacement. For what happens when someone steps outside the timeline and then returns. Modern physics has started inching toward these same questions. In 1971, the Hafele-Keating experiment flew atomic clocks around the Earth on jet planes. They lost time, exactly as relativity predicted. Time is not constant. Time bends. And once you accept that, all bets are off. Suddenly, Kukudmi's story isn't a fairy tale. It's a lab report. And if ancient sages knew about time dilation, what else did they know? About energy? About dimensional bleed? About reality as a flexible interface, not a fixed construct? Because when you strip away the incense and chanting, the story of Kukudmi is just this. A man went somewhere higher. He came back different. The world was unrecognizable, and he could never return, which feels eerily familiar. Like maybe we've all done it before. And maybe, in those forbidden places Ashoka warned us about, time still loops sideways. And somewhere, someone is still tracking all of this. Silently. From above. Maybe they're not just watching. Maybe they're still flying. The yantras found in ancient temples. They lie under your feet, carved into stone floors, hidden in sanctums, inked on copper plates, tucked beneath idols. Etched where no one bothers to look because most people walk into temples expecting gods, not machines. But that's what yantras are. Not metaphors, not ornaments. Machines. Not in the clanking, gear-spinning, steam-hissing sense, but in a far stranger, more disturbing way. Because these ancient diagrams weren't meant to be seen. They were meant to work. Let's break it down. A yantra is a geometric figure usually made up of intersecting triangles, circles, and lotus petals arranged in precise mathematical proportion. You've seen the Sri yantra, even if you didn't know what it was. A cascade of triangles forming a symmetry so perfect, it makes your nervous system twitch. But what you probably didn't know is that these aren't just spiritual symbols. In Indian temple architecture and tantric ritual, yantras are functional devices, each one calibrated to do something. Protect, amplify, heal, invoke, activate. They're not just images. Their interfaces. Now here's the part that twists your brain. Yantras are often placed in hidden locations inside temples beneath sanctums, under Shivalingas, or within foundational stones. They're not meant for public display. You don't pray to them. You don't even really see them. You walk over them. You stand on them. And that's not a bug. That's the feature. Because yantras aren't meant to be worshipped. They're meant to affect space to modify the energy of a place the way a tuning fork alters sound in a room. They're part vibration map, part cosmic circuitry, and part psychic tool. The Agamas ancient Sanskrit manuals on temple construction are obsessively specific about this. They prescribe which yantra goes where, at what depth, in what material, at what planetary hour, facing which direction. One wrong angle, and the whole system is compromised. Which raises the question, system? What system? Well, let's talk temples. Most Indian temples are built not as symbolic structures, but as energy machines designed to create, store, and transmit specific frequencies. The central sanctum or Garbha Grihis, the energy core. The idol is the conduit. The yantra beneath it is the processor. Now think about that. Ancient engineers were creating vibration-modulating environments, using architectural resonance, mantra-based activation, and buried diagrams that still make mathematicians sweat. Take the Sri Yantra. When mapped in 3 dimensions, it forms a hyperspatial latticia, kind of energy pyramid constructed from interlocking tetrahedrons. Its ratios are non-Euclidean, its alignments impossible to freehand, and yet it appears accurately carved into temple floors from Tamil Nadu to Odisha. One physicist called it the mathematical fingerprint of consciousness. Another said it resembled quantum interference patterns. Others have noted that the angles in the Sri Yantra align with acoustic standing wave patterns, suggesting it wasn't just drawn, it was heard. And then, carved into stone. Now add this. Certain yantras are made with metal alloys, sealed in ritual, and buried at geologically resonant places where the Earth's magnetic field fluctuates, or where underground water channels cross. Which means someone, thousands of years ago, knew about geomagnetic fields, vibrational nodes, and subsurface resonance. We just gave them incense and called it religion. Here's another one. The Kurma Yantra, tortoise, shaped, said to stabilize tectonic energy, placed under temples in earthquake-prone zones. No idea how they knew it worked, but it does. Or the Bagala Yantra, associated with psychic shielding, often buried beneath cremation grounds converted into temple spaces. Coincidence? Not likely. There are hundreds of these, and no one knows who invented them. They're just there, passed down through palm leaf manuscripts, whispered into the ears of initiates, preserved not as blueprints but as rituals. Because here's the kicker. Yantras don't function alone. They require sound. Each one is activated through specific mantra's vocal frequencies that cause the stone, or metal, or even the air above them to vibrate in a precise way. When chanted correctly, the yantra wakes up. The diagrams don't do the work. They coordinate it, like wiring, like code, like an ancient operating system built from sacred geometry and acoustic resonance. Now imagine the implications. If yantras are real functional, not decorative, then temples aren't just places of worship. They're machines, acoustic generators, reality stabilizers, energy transformers, maybe even portals. That's what some tantric texts hint at. That specific yantras, when activated in conjunction with mantra, mudra, and time alignment, can produce states of consciousness not normally accessible, or even locations not normally reachable. We're not saying stargates, but we're also not saying stargates. Because once you accept that sacred geometry can influence biology, consciousness, and space itself, you start wondering what the ancients were trying to access. and what happened when they did. Maybe that's why some yantras were destroyed. Why certain temples were desecrated, their sanctums dug out, their foundation stones removed. Not just to erase religion, but to disable a system. And maybe that's why, in some temples, you still feel it. That thrum in the air, that impossible stillness, that tension in your skin when you cross a threshold. The yantra is still there, still waiting, still pulsing. A silent, invisible map under your feet, whispering in a language no one speaks anymore. Except maybe the stone. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the ancients were building toward. Not walls, not gods, but a way to hold space, to contain something, something that didn't die, something that couldn't die, only disappear, or wait, like a saint sealed in shadow, breathing, still. The sealed saint of Rosa Bal. Some tombs are quiet because the dead are done talking. Others are quiet because the dead still know too much. Nestled in the heart of Srinagar, in Kashmir, just off a noisy market street where tourists haggle over saffron and prayer beads, stands a modest building, small, white, unassuming. You'd walk past it unless you knew. It's called Rosa Bal. It claims to be a Maqbara Muslim shrine. Inside, there's a wooden chamber, and inside that, a stone sarcophagus covered in green cloth, surrounded by wooden lattices and a sense of unearned stillness. Locals will tell you it's the tomb of Uz Asif, a sage from the west who came to Kashmir, healed the sick, preached peace, and died here. Some call him a prophet, others, a wandering mystic, and others say Uz Asif was Jesus Christ. Yes, that Jesus. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Crucified in Jerusalem, survived, escaped, traveled east with his followers, preached in Persia, settled in India, lived, aged, died, buried not in a cave in Judea, but in the cool earth of northern India, under a shrine that still stands. It's one of the most explosive claims in comparative religion and one of the most obsessively avoided, because if it's true, it would unravel centuries of theological infrastructure. Christianity, Islam, even certain interpretations of Buddhism would crack open like an overripe pomegranate. So let's ask, what exactly is in Rosa Bal? Let's talk physical evidence. The tomb is oriented east-west, unusual for a Muslim burial, which traditionally faces Mecca, but it's consistent with Jewish burial customs. There's a pair of feet carved in stone, preserved next to the sarcophagus. The soles show crucifixion wounds specifically, marks that appear to indicate nails driven through the sides of the feet, rather than the front, which, according to some forensic reconstructions, is a more structurally plausible method of crucifixion. Coincidence? Maybe. But there's more. The name Uz Asif appears in multiple ancient texts, Persian, Kashmiri, and Tibetan. In the Tariq-i-Kashmir, a 16th century Persian chronicle, Uz Asif is described as a foreign prophet who settled in Srinagar after traveling extensively. He healed with touch, preached love, spoke of a kingdom not of this world. Sound familiar? In the Bhavishya Purana, a Sanskrit text whose authorship and dating are still hotly debated, there's an even more chilling mention. It describes a holy man named Isa Masih, Jesus the Messiah, meeting with King Shalivahana of India and identifying himself as the son of a virgin born in the West and persecuted by his own people. Then there's the Tibetan scrolls. Nicholas Notovich, a Russian explorer in the 19th century, claimed to have found manuscripts in the Hemis monastery in Ladakh describing the life of Saint Isa, a foreign-born teacher who studied with Buddhists and Hindus before returning west to preach, only to be executed and later escape. Notovich was dismissed as a crank, until other researchers independent claimed to have seen similar texts. Then the manuscripts disappeared. Sealed, moved, or maybe just unavailable, just like Rosabal itself. In the early 2000s, a sudden burst of interest, mostly from fringe theorists, documentary crews, and rogue historians, prompted the site's custodians to seal the tomb, literally, with chains and locks. No access to the inner chamber, no more photos, no more theories. The official reason, out of respect. The unofficial reason? Panic. Because whether or not Yusuf was Jesus, the evidence started pointing to someone who didn't fit our timelines. A healer, a preacher, a traveler, a man with buried knowledge. And Kashmir, already a powder keg of politics and prophecy, was not ready to host the second coming, or the first one's retirement villa. But let's ask a better question. What if Rosabal is just the tip of the grave? What if there are more tombs like this, scattered across India? Sites that don't fit, saints that aren't accounted for, ruins that belong to people who weren't supposed to be here. What if the Vedic world, the Buddhist world, and the Judeo-Christian world overlapped more than we think? Not because of war, not because of empire, but because they came from the same source. One world, many stories, and some of the characters walked between them. And maybe that's what Rosabal really is. Not a tomb, a bookmark. In a story someone's trying to forget. Or maybe it's not a burial at all. Maybe it's a seal. Because there's another legend in Kashmir, half erased, that Yusuf never died. That his body remains incorrupt, untouched by time. Waiting, breathing. Some say he lies in suspended animation. Some say the tomb is empty. And some say it isn't a tomb at all, but a gate. Which brings us back to the same terrible, beautiful question behind every mystery on this list. What if they never left? What if they're just waiting for us to wake up? To notice the signs? To feel the vibration in stone? To hear the silence that isn't silence? Because if Rosabal is real, if even a fraction of it is real, then resurrection isn't the miracle. It's the protocol. The synchronized pillars of Lapakshi. From a distance, Lapakshi looks like a forgotten postcard, a dusty hilltop in Andhra Pradesh, half swallowed by time, crowned with sandstone spires and elephant motifs. A sleepy temple town, ignored by the modern world except for a few history buffs and the occasional spiritual tourist. But step inside the Virabhadra temple, and you enter a space that doesn't behave like it was built by hand. It behaves like it was engineered. Meticulously. Deliberately. With a level of mechanical logic so unsettling it forces a second glance. Because this isn't just sacred geometry. It's kinetic architecture. Welcome to the mystery of the hanging Palara. Stone columns suspended a hair's breadth above the temple floor, never quite touching it, never quite explaining itself. And it's not a party trick. It's a structural anomaly. There are over 70 stone pillars in the hall, all weight-bearing, all aligned to balance centuries of stone ceiling. But one of them, the Akasa Stamba, or hanging pillar, doesn't touch the ground. Slide a cloth underneath it. Watch it pass through. Try to explain it. You can't. And neither can structural engineers. Because no matter how many surveys, scans, or simulations are done, the pillar remains impossibly suspended, defying gravity, friction, and basic tectonics. It is not floating, it is load-bearing. And that is exactly what makes it terrifying. Let's rewind. The temple was built in the 16th century, during the Vijayanagara Empire, known for its extravagantly detailed temples and brutalist grandeur. Local legend says it was constructed in a single day by the celestial architect Vishwakarma's descendants. But that doesn't explain the precision alignment of stone elements. Not just walls and domes, but resonant surfaces, energy channels, and most disturbingly, vibration-canceling corridor spaces where sound abruptly dies mid-echo as if swallowed by some acoustic predator. And the hanging pillar? It's not alone. Researchers have noted that many of the pillars at Lapakshi are symmetrically synchronized. When tapped gently, they resonate at matched frequencies. Some theorists believe the pillars operate as a harmonic grid, a system of standing waves engineered into the stone, designed not just to support structure, but to modulate vibration. Why? Maybe to amplify ritual sound. Maybe to stabilize the region's intense geomagnetic fluctuations? Maybe to contain something. Or maybe they're not amplifying anything at all. Maybe they're canceling it. Think tuning fork versus noise-canceling headphones. A destructive interference pattern engineered into architecture that nullifies specific frequencies like the hum of seismic waves or the subtle energies produced by objects or entities that shouldn't be here. And that brings us back to the hanging pillar. Because here's the thing, it shouldn't work. Stone structures rely on contact points. Weight needs to distribute vertically. But this pillar appears to levitate, holding up tons of granite from above while its base hovers over empty space. Some say it was damaged during British surveys. But there's no chipping, no sagging, no cracking. Just absence. It's like the base was intentionally disconnected, like a switch in a circuit that was meant to be left open. Or maybe it's the ground that moved. Maybe the pillar stayed still and the rest of reality shifted around it. Because here's the other thing no one wants to talk about. The floor beneath the pillar is depressed, a smooth indentation as if the ground once pressed upward, then recoiled. Like a pressure valve that released, or a memory that triggered and then vanished. And what is Lapakshi? A temple, yes, but also a map. Its layout mirrors the human body, like Chidambaram. Its murals depict not just gods and dancers, but celestial mechanics. There's a giant footprint in the floor attributed to Hanuman, but out of proportion, as if left by something much larger, something that might have stood here, looked up, and then left, or fell. The temple's name even tells a story. Lepakshi in Telugu means, "Rise, O bird." Legend has it that Jatayu, the divine eagle from the Ramayana, fell here after battling Ravana. Rama, upon finding the dying creature, whispered those words, "Lepakshi, rise." But what if it's not just about a bird? What if that line, "Rise, O bird," wasn't a blessing? What if it was a command? What if this temple wasn't built to remember something sacred, but to hold down something that tried to fly away? That's what the hanging pillar might be. Not a flaw, a seal, a reminder that something once rose here and something else tried to stop it. Maybe the entire temple is a crash site, or a containment system, a grid of stone frequencies designed to stabilize a rupture in reality. Because that's what the ancient architects did best. They didn't just build, they calibrated. Temples weren't expressions of faith, they were technologies of containment. And sometimes, they had to do more than echo the gods. They had to hold them back. So if one pillar is hanging, maybe it's not the only thing suspended. Maybe something else is waiting. Under the floor, inside the resonance, just on the other side of frequency. A being, a memory, a machine, or a god who no longer dances. He listens, and one day, if the vibration changes, he rises, the iron pillar that refuses to rust. It stands there, quietly mocking the modern world. In the middle of Delhi's Qutub Complexa UNESCO World Heritage Site, known mostly for its towering minaret, there's something even taller, in implication if not in height. A modest, slender iron pillar, about 7 meters tall, unadorned, undecorated, and completely at odds with the oxygen-rich atmosphere around it. Because it hasn't rusted, not in 1,600 years. No corrosion, no flaking, no structural decay. Just an ancient metallurgical miracle sitting in plain sight, while nearby steel railings installed in the 1990s already show spots of orange death. It's called the Iron Pillar of Delhi, but it might as well be called the middle finger of ancient India waved at every metallurgist, chemist, and materials scientist still trying to explain how it exists. And more unnervingly, why? Let's get into it. Conservatively dated to the 4th century CE, though some argue it's much older, the Iron Pillar was originally erected in central India and later transported to its current home. It bears a Sanskrit inscription in Brahmi script, attributing it to King Chandragupta II, a ruler of the Gupta dynasty. It's composed of 99.72% wrought iron, which should have corroded within a few hundred years, especially in Delhi's monsoon-prone climate. And yet, it hasn't. It has weathered acid rain, pollution, dust storms, humidity, and the oily fingerprints of millions of curious tourist sand. Still, no rust. Why? Theories abound. Some say it's due to the high phosphorus content and absence of sulfur and manganese giving rise to a protective passivation layer, a microscopic barrier that repels moisture and oxidation. Others point to forge welding techniques and unique ancient smelting processes lost to history. But here's the twist. Modern replications of these methods still don't produce the same anti-corrosive effect, which raises a darker possibility that we're not missing the method. We're missing the context, because the Iron Pillar isn't alone. Similar corrosion-resistant iron artifacts have been found in Dar, Mandu, Kodachadri, and most eerily, in Bhaktapur, Nepal, where a rust-free trident still gleams atop a temple roof centuries after its installation. Something was going on. Either a lost science of metallurgy, or something even stranger. Let's consider the pillar as a device, not an artifact. Its shape, cylindrical, perfectly symmetrical, acoustically resonant. Its positioning? Aligned with the celestial meridian. Its function, that's where it gets speculative. Some Vedic texts describe dvaja stambhas, pillar-like structures erected at sacred sites to act as energy conductors, connecting earth to sky, not symbolic conductors, literal ones. The Iron Pillar may have functioned as an electromagnetic stabilizer, a kind of ancient tuning rod for the atmosphere's subtle charge. Ancient temples and observatories were often designed around geomagnetic nodes, and the placement of metallic structures at these nodes could have served purposes we've long forgotten. Enhancing cognitive clarity during rituals, channeling atmospheric electricity into the ground during cosmic events, shielding against environmental energetic disruptions. In other words, not a monument, a tool. And here's where things cross the threshold from, interesting, to, oh God, what else have we lost? The Iron Pillar has been struck by lightning documented several times. It never split. It never shattered. It absorbed the current and remained standing. Which makes some believe it was designed to do that. To act as a conductor, not for electricity alone, but for something subtler. Consciousness, perhaps. Mantra frequency, maybe. Or even as a grounding device for entities or energies once channeled at that site. What if the Iron Pillar isn't just proof of advanced metallurgy? What if it's evidence of an interface? A way the ancients spoke to the sky. Now consider the inscription. It doesn't boast about its craftsmanship. It praises Vishnu, the preserver of the universe, and speaks of the pillar's eternal Dvajite's unshakable standing. It was meant to last forever, not because it's sacred, but because it had to. There are whispers never published, always denied about magnetic anomalies near the pillar, compass deviations, strange animal behavior. Some say their phones glitch when standing beside it. Some say they've heard humming when the wind hits just right. Maybe these are urban legends. Or maybe we're listening to a machine that's still humming after 1,600 years, waiting for someone to remember the password. Because this isn't the only structure that refuses to degrade. There are temples carved from mountain tops, still aligned to solstices. Yantras buried under shrines, still active. Scripts etched on copper, still legible. And maybe, just maybe, a pillar that stands between ages, acting as a marker for those who knew that everything corrodes, except the truth. And the truth is this: the iron pillar shouldn't exist, and yet it does. Which begs the question, who built it? And what else did they leave behind? Maybe a gate, maybe a seal, maybe a memory disguised as metal. Because in ancient India, the gods didn't descend from the sky. Sometimes, they just walked in. The sacred geometry of Hampi, Earth's blueprint. They say Hampi is a ruin. They say it's a city of stones, toppled temples, fractured idols, ancient dreams crumbling under sun and time. But Hampi isn't ruined. Hampi is encrypted. Because once you stop looking at its structures and start looking at their relationships, the angles, alignments, spatial ratios, and astronomical fixed points, you realize something disturbing. Hampi wasn't built. It was plotted. Located in Karnataka, South India, and once the capital of the mighty Vijayanagara Empire, Hampi is a surreal sprawl of boulders, shrines, monolithic sculptures, stepped tanks, and temples that seem more grown than constructed. But here's the mystery that refuses to die. Hampi matches sacred geometry. Not in one temple, in all of it. Across 4,000 monuments spread over 25 square kilometers, an invisible grid ties them together. A map of energy lines, a web of angles derived not from urban planning but cosmic mathematics. The whole city is laid out like a Yantran Earth-sized mandala, readable only when viewed as a single object. And at the heart of that geometry sits a name that no one can explain: Vijaya Vitala. The Vitala temple complex is Hampi's crown jewel. Famous for its musical pillars, pillars that ring like tuned chimes when struck into its stone chariot, a supposedly immovable monolith that vibrates under specific chants. But the real miracle isn't the sound. It's the silence between the structures. Every pillar, every shrine, every column is placed in ratios that correspond with musical intervals. Not accidentally, deliberately. The whole site is a harmonic engine, built to conduct sound, light, and human consciousness like it's an instrument. Now ask yourself, who thinks like that? Who designs a city as if it were a song? Modern archaeologists explain it away as aesthetic alignment, a byproduct of devotional architecture. But sacred geometry doesn't care about aesthetics. It cares about frequency. At Hampi, that frequency isn't metaphorical. The temples are aligned with celestial movements. On solstices and equinoxes, shadows fall at impossible angles. Moonlight floods sanctums that remain dark the rest of the year. And the stone chariot? It's not a chariot, it's a tuning chamber, a resonant sculpture placed on a ley line. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. The whole city seems to track something that's no longer here. Inscriptions, broken statues, fragments of L'Oreal referencing events and beings that predate the Vijayanagara Empire by millennia. Stories of flying cities, invisible weapons, gateways to higher realms, and cosmic wars fought not in the sky but in geometry. Hampi isn't a capital. It's a memory palace. And at its core lies the Pushkaranya step tank, so perfectly symmetrical it makes modern CAD engineers nervous. Its dimensions match Fibonacci ratios. Its echo returns at intervals of pi. Sound tests reveal standing wave harmonics. And no one knows who built it. Not really. The locals say the tank is a mirror for the sky. But others say it's a modella fractal simulation of larger geometries. Some believe it maps the Earth's magnetic field. Others think it's a star chart, showing the position of constellations during an ancient convergence event. One that hasn't happened yet, or already did. Because buried beneath Hampi is a far older tradition, one that speaks of the yuga cycles, of chakra alignment, of planetary harmonics encoded into architecture. Hampi's layout mirrors not just a yantra, but a kundalini map. It's a city built like a spine, with energy point chakras marked by temples. From the Anjanadri Hill, Muladhara, to the Vitdala Temple, Sahasrara, the journey across the ruins becomes a walk through consciousness itself. That's not city planning. That's dimensional engineering. So who built Hampi? Vijayanagara kings? Or were they just restorers? Did they inherit something? Find something? Complete something? Because here's what no one talks about. Hampi was abandoned suddenly. Despite its grandeur, its wealth, its spiritual significance, something forced its people to leave. No slow decay, just gone. Some blame the Deccan Sultanates. Others point to astronomical anomalies, drought cycles, geomagnetic events, or maybe the city served its purpose and was never meant to last. Just like a yantra drawn in sand before a ritual meant to guide a moment, then erased before the next. Here's what remains. A temple whose pillars still sing, though no one knows why. A map that shows not cities, but chakras. A memory of something that vibrated not in space but in pattern. And a silence that grows louder the longer you listen. Because Hampi isn't just built on sacred ground. Hampi is sacred ground. Sacred not because gods once walked there, but because they might come back. Or maybe they never left. Maybe they're still in the stones. Still humming. Still sinking to something that hasn't happened yet, but is already on its way. Just like the sound you hear before the bell rings. Not noise. Alignment. And you're standing in the middle of it. The unmoving Shiva Linga of Gavi Gangadhareshwara. It sits in the dark, inside a cave, surrounded by stone and shadow, and a silence thick enough to swallow your name. You don't find the Gavi Gangadhareshwara temple. It finds you, carved directly into a monolithic rock formation in the heart of modern-day Bengaluru. This ancient temple looks like something that formed naturally, and then remembered it was divine. No flamboyant architecture. No towering gopuram. Just a system of tunnels, pillars, and a Shiva Linga that won't move. Can't move. And shouldn't. Because here's the mystery. Once a year on Makara Sankranti, sometime in mid-January, a single beam of sunlight snakes its way through the temple's front arch, threads itself through two narrow window slits, and lands directly on the central linga, illuminating it for just a few minutes. No lights, no mirrors, no edits, just the sun, the stone, and something the ancients built without GPS, lasers, or architectural software. Try to replicate it today. You won't, because this isn't alignment. It's precision programming. Let's get into it. The temple dates back at least to the 9th century CE, though some claim it's even older, built by pre-Vedic sages who lived underground, away from cosmic events and social collapse. It's carved from a single piece of stone, creating a complex cave system that aligns to celestial events with unnatural accuracy. But the real mystery is the linga. A Shiva Linga is traditionally symbolic, non-anthropomorphic, representing divine stillness, the seed of creation. But this one? It's implanted. Geologists who've studied it believe the linga wasn't placed there. It emerged from the rock. It's the same material, continuous with the cave, not inserted, not chiseled. It's as if the rock itself decided to become Shiva. And here's where it gets stranger. Multiple attempts to measure, extract, or even photograph the base of the linga have failed. There are no seams, no shadows, no tool marks. The linga simply is. Which begs the question, is it a symbol? Or is it alive? Ancient temple lore refers to Swayambhu lingas that are self-born, not sculpted. Energetic nodes where consciousness condenses into matter. Modern physics might call that a singularity. A standing wave. A breach in the fabric where form emerges from the formless. So maybe it's not that the linga can't be moved. Maybe it's that it's anchoring something. A vibration. A memory. A machine. And the sunlight? It's not a celebration. It's a ping. A once-a-year activation signal, a celestial OK that tells the system the earth is still turning, the temple is still in sync, and whatever's beneath the linga is still sealed. Because yes, there are rumors of tunnels, of chambers, of a circular passage beneath the linga that loops endlessly unless entered on the correct day, with the correct mantra, in the correct vibrational state. Sound familiar? It should. Because this is Portal Engineering 101. Align the physical with the celestial. Embed the gate in something unmoving. And tie its activation to a star clock no one remembers how to read. Until someone accidentally does. There's more. The temple features 4 monolithic pillars, believed to represent the solar system's 4 major timekeepers: Sunday, Moon, Earth, and Saturn. Saturn, the slowest, the densest, the most feared. In Vedic astrology, Saturn, Shani, is the planet of karmic rebalancing. It doesn't destroy, it reveals. And that might be the whole function of the temple. Not to worship, to reveal. Once a year, the temple shows you the light. Literally, the beam, the linga, the convergence. And the rest of the year? It waits. Because Gavi Gangadhar Shwara isn't a place of ritual. It's a clock, a countdown, a location that tracks something we forgot, something cosmic, cyclic, and inevitable. And that something might be under the linga, still sealed, still sleeping, still sinking. Because the ancients weren't just praying here, they were programming. They were tuning space to time, stone to star, silence to memory. And they left us the device, but not the manual. So we watch the sunbeam hit the stone once a year, and we think it's beautiful. We don't realize it's a check-in, a cosmic password, one that still works. And the question we never ask is, what happens when it doesn't? The 7 submerged pagodas of Mahabalipuram. Most people go to Mahabalipuram for the stone carvings, the monolithic temples, the seaside breeze, the giant bas-relief known as Arjuna's penance that seems to ripple with stone-born dreams. Tourists take selfies, pilgrims offer prayers. But no one's really looking. Not out at the sea. Not down into the water. Because the greatest mystery of Mahabalipuram isn't on land. It's underneath it. According to legend, the famous shore temple we see today perched dramatically at the edge of the Bay of Bengal is just the tip of something much larger. A fragment. A survivor. The ancient Tamil texts say there were once 7 pagodas, 7 magnificent temples built in a perfect line along the coast, glowing so brightly in the sun that even the gods turned their heads. And now? Only 1 remains. The other 6 were, allegedly, swallowed by the sea. Everyone assumed it was a myth. Until 2004. When the Indian Ocean tsunami struck, the sea receded briefly, horrifically exposing something no one expected. Stone structures, submerged a few hundred feet offshore, with carvings, steps, and walls that matched the architectural style of Mahabalipuram. Local fishermen had spoken about them for generations, structures where no boat should pass. Most assumed they were telling stories. They weren't. Archaeologists rushed in. Divers, sonar mapping, ground-penetrating radar. And there it was. A submerged complex, stretching under the ocean floor, consistent with 8th century temple construction, possibly much older, alignments that matched the sun, pillars with lion carvings, floors that had never been walked on by anyone alive. Only, no one talks about what they really found. Because some of the carvings were different, unfinished, asymmetrical, fused with coral in ways that defied marine biology timelines. And some of the shapes weren't temples. Some of the sonar maps revealed perfectly circular chambers, joined by thin corridors, not consistent with any known Pallava dynasty architecture, not consistent with any known surface architecture, but eerily consistent with subterranean systems, or pre-flood structures. Here's where it gets darker. Tamil lore, passed down by temple priests and fishermen, claims that the 7 pagodas were built to anchor something beneath them, not a god, not a relic. A serpent, not metaphorically. They speak of a being part energy, part consciousness chained beneath the sea. The temples weren't built to honor it. They were built to hold it down. Every temple was a node, a lock. And when the 6th temple fell, the shoreline changed. The tides began to shift, and the ocean came for the 7th. The shore temple isn't sacred because it's old. It's sacred because it's the last seal still working. Look at the site from above. Modern drone scans show a strange geometry to the underwater structures. They follow a spiral, not a line. Each pagoda was part of a circuit, a yantra. And at the center, a depression in the ocean floor. They say it's natural. It doesn't look natural. It looks like something once rosier sank. The temples were built to keep it stable. But here's the question no one wants to ask. Why build 7 temples, knowing they would be swallowed? Unless the architects knew the sea would come. Unless they were building against time. Against cycles. Against something that comes in waves. There's a deeper legend never written, only spoken, passed in the hush of temple corridors, that the original 7 weren't built by humans at all. They were revealed to humans. Cut into existence by a single beam of sound projected from a star vehicle hovering over the ocean, that the structures were vibrated into being, not built, that they function not as places of worship, but as resonant stabilizers to keep Earth's energy grid in alignment. And when the grid is misaligned, things wake up. Which brings us back to the tsunami. What else did it uncover that day? Some say divers found a second tier of structures, deeper down, buried, melted, cut with precision tools not even our modern engineers understand. Others say the Indian government classified the scans, said it was a cultural heritage zone. Sealed off. No further diving permitted. Because maybe it wasn't just ruins. Maybe it was evidence of a pre-Ice Age civilization, of a global grid, of something that once lived beneath the 7 pagodas, and might again. The temple still stands, for now. But the shoreline erodes more every year, and the waves are getting louder. Because 1 seal is a monument, 2 is a coincidence, 3 is a machine, and 7? 7 is a prison. And when 6 have fallen, you don't ask if the last one will collapse. You ask when, and what happens after. The Hidden Codex of Bhandarkar Institute. There are archives filled with silence, shelves that hum with the weight of stories no one is allowed to read. And deep in the city of Pune, behind red-bricked walls and colonial quiet, sits one of the most guarded repositories of ancient Indian knowledge. The Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, or BORI. If you know the acronym, and if you're the kind of person who knows to whisper it. Founded in 1917, BORI was meant to be an academic hub, a public institute for Sanskrit texts, rare palm leaf manuscripts, copperplate inscriptions, Vedic commentaries, and cultural preservation. But that's not all it is. Because somewhere within its temperature-controlled vaults, behind the glass cases and polite tour groups, lies a manuscript so old, so strange, and so potentially dangerous that even scholars don't like to speak about it aloud. They call it the Brahma Jnana Codex. The codex isn't officially listed in any catalog. It doesn't sit in the public reading room. Most people at the Institute have never seen it. And yet, for over 50 years, references to this mysterious document have been whispered through insider circles, always in vague, nervous terms. Here's what we know. The Codex is written in a language that is not quite Sanskrit, not Pali, not Tamil, something older. Some say it's Vataju, a Proto-South Indian script used for esoteric inscriptions. Others say it's unknown entirely. It's not even on the Unicode charts. The script flows in spirals, not lines. It wraps around itself. Paragraphs that circle like a mandala. Sentences that require physical rotation of the leaf to read. No punctuation. No page numbers. Just symbols that seem to respond to the direction of light. You read it wrong? It reads you back. The Codex was first discovered during a cleanup of a collapsed archive in the 1960s. An unmarked bundle, wrapped in silk, hidden inside a larger manuscript on ritual astronomy. Inside were 13 leaves of darkened palm fiber, etched so finely the grooves could only be seen under grazing angle light. Scholars who tried to translate it reported strange symptoms: sleep paralysis, auditory hallucinations, precognitive dreams, extreme déjà vu. One researcher, Dr. Kumar Devraj, reportedly burned his entire collection of notes after transcribing only 4 pages. Then, he disappeared. No forwarding address, no resignation letter, just a gap. And this was not one of those vague, spooky manuscript urban legends. This happened. Bori has since refused to acknowledge the Codex's existence, but leaks persist, whispered academic papers, references in footnotes that cite unpublished VJ-class leaf bundles. The most persistent theory? The Codex contains a mechanical model of consciousness. Not philosophy. Not metaphor. Mechanics. A system of sound, breath, geometry, and will combined into a formula that allows human thought to interact with external reality in real time. Like code. Like an operating system. Not prayer. Execution. And if that's true, the Codex may be the only surviving fragment of a pre-Vedic science that treated the self as an engine. It doesn't describe deities. It describes interfaces. Diagrams of circuits made not from wires, but from mantras and mudras. Breath rhythms that open neural resonance fields. Phrases that edit internal states. Pages that teach you how to recompile yourself. Here's the kicker. Some of the Codex glyphs match those found on Indus Valley seals. Exactly. Not similar. Exact. Which shouldn't be possible. Because according to history, the Indus script is undeciphered and has no known connection to Vedic or post-Vedic languages. But if the Codex bridges that gap, then it's not just a manuscript. It's the missing link between India's greatest ancient civilization and its mystical aftermath. And maybe that's why it was hidden. Because if the Codex is real, if it really does contain a technology of self-aware consciousness, then we're no longer dealing with literature. We're dealing with a user manual for reality. A key. A weapon. A cure. Or a trigger. And what happens if someone figures out how to use it? What happens if it falls into the wrong hands? Or the right ones? At the wrong time? Maybe that's why Bori keeps denying its existence. Not to erase it, but to buy us time. Because some truths aren't meant to be shared until the listener is ready. Until the resonance is right. Until the voice inside the leaf awakens. So if you ever find yourself inside Bori, and you hear a vibration coming from a room no one enters. Don't follow it. Not unless you're willing to remember everything. Because knowledge is a door, and some doors lock from the inside. The 7 submerged pagodas of Mahabalipuram. Most people go to Mahabalipuram for the stone carvings, the monolithic temples, the seaside breeze, the giant bas-relief known as Arjuna's penance that seems to ripple with stone-born dreams. Tourists take selfies, pilgrims offer prayers, but no one's really looking. Not out at the sea, not down into the water, because the greatest mystery of Mahabalipuram isn't on land. It's underneath it. According to legend, the famous shore temple we see today perched dramatically at the edge of the Bay of Bengalis, just the tip of something much larger. A fragment, a survivor. The ancient Tamil texts say there were once 7 pagodas, 7 magnificent temples built in a perfect line along the coast, glowing so brightly in the sun that even the gods turned their heads. And now? Only 1 remains. The other 6 were, allegedly, swallowed by the sea. Everyone assumed it was a myth, until 2004. When the Indian Ocean tsunami struck, the sea receded briefly, horrifically exposing something no one expected. Stone structures, submerged a few hundred feet offshore, with carvings, steps, and walls that matched the architectural style of Mahabalipuram. Local fishermen had spoken about them for generations, structures where no boat should pass. Most assumed they were telling stories. They weren't. Archaeologists rushed in. Divers, sonar mapping, ground-penetrating radar. And there it was. A submerged complex, stretching under the ocean floor, consistent with 8th century temple construction, possibly much older. Alignments that matched the sun. Pillars with lion carvings, floors that had never been walked on by anyone alive. Only, no one talks about what they really found. Because some of the carvings were different, unfinished, asymmetrical, fused with coral in ways that defied marine biology timelines. And some of the shapes weren't temples. Some of the sonar maps revealed perfectly circular chambers, joined by thin corridors, not consistent with any known Pallava dynasty architecture, not consistent with any known surface architecture, but eerily consistent with subterranean systems, or pre-flood structures. Here's where it gets darker. Tamil lore, passed down by temple priests and fishermen, claims that the 7 pagodas were built to anchor something beneath them, not a god, not a relic, a serpent. Not metaphorically. They speak of a being part energy, part consciousness chained beneath the sea. The temples weren't built to honor it. They were built to hold it down. Every temple was a node, a lock. And when the 6th temple fell, the shoreline changed. The tides began to shift, and the ocean came for the 7th. The shore temple isn't sacred because it's old. It's sacred because it's the last seal still working. Look at the site from above. Modern drone scans show a strange geometry to the underwater structures. They follow a spiral, not a line. Each pagoda was part of a circuit, a yantra. And at the center, a depression in the ocean floor. They say it's natural. It doesn't look natural. It looks like something once rosier sank. The temples were built to keep it stable. But here's the question no one wants to ask. Why build 7 temples, knowing they would be swallowed? Unless the architects knew the sea would come. Unless they were building against time. Against cycles. Against something that comes in waves. There's a deeper legend never written, only spoken, passed in the hush of temple corridors, that the original 7 weren't built by humans at all. They were revealed to humans, cut into existence by a single beam of sound projected from a star vehicle hovering over the ocean, that the structures were vibrated into being, not built, that they function not as places of worship, but as resonance stabilizers to keep Earth's energy grid in alignment. And when the grid is misaligned, things wake up. Which brings us back to the tsunami. What else did it uncover that day? Some say divers found a second tier of structures, deeper down, buried, melted, cut with precision tools not even our modern engineers understand. Others say the Indian government classified the scans, said it was a cultural heritage zone. Sealed off. No further diving permitted. Because maybe it wasn't just ruins. Maybe it was evidence of a pre-Ice Age civilization, of a global grid, of something that once lived beneath the 7 pagodas, and might again. The temple still stands, for now. But the shoreline erodes more every year, and the waves are getting louder. Because 1 seal is a monument, 2 is a coincidence, 3 is a machine, and 7? 7 is a prison. And when 6 have fallen, you don't ask if the last one will collapse. You ask when, and what happens after? The disappearance of the Nemi ships from Dwarka. There are cities that sink because of tides, and then there are cities that sink because they're supposed to. In the western shallows of the Arabian Sea, off the coast of Gujarat, lies one of the most contested and quietly quarantined underwater archaeological zones on Earth. Divers whisper about it. Sonar maps contradict each other, official studies stall out, and the ocean, inconveniently, keeps withdrawing at the wrong times if it, too, is hiding something. Welcome to Dwarka. Not the modern city, not the pilgrimage site, the original Dwarka, the lost city of Krishna. According to ancient texts like the Mahabharata, Harivamsa, and Vishnu Purana, Krishna's Dwarka was no fishing village. It was a fortress of light, a marvel of engineering, built on an island reclaimed from the sea. A place of palaces, bridges, gold towers, lotus ponds, floating gardens, and flying ships. Yes, flying ships. Not just vimanas, something more specific. The texts call them semicircular aerial craft used by Krishna and his warriors, capable of moving in all directions, shining with unnatural radiance. Described not in poetry, but in technical language, with dimensions, materials, even launch sequences. You think that's metaphor? Good. Now explain why the Indian National Institute of Oceanography, in a low-profile expedition in 2001, found geometric stone structures 30 meters under the sea, near Bet Dwarka, that matched the layout of a planned city grids, docks, a 580-meter wall, and something else. A hangar-shaped cavity, unlike anything found in maritime archaeological records. Then the report stopped. Just like that. Until 2002, when a dive run official, freelance, too curious for his own good, released grainy footage of what appeared to be a circular metal base, partially embedded in coral, lined with etchings that weren't script, but schematics. He said the site gave off a low-frequency hum. Said his compass spun. Said his oxygen meter dropped suddenly, then corrected itself 5 meters away. He uploaded the footage, then deleted it, and disappeared. And now? You're not allowed to dive in that area without multiple permits, which are currently under review. Here's where it gets stranger. The Mahabharata doesn't just describe Dwarka as a city, it says it was a field test. That Krishna didn't build it alone, that it was assisted by celestial engineers Maya Danava, the same architect who built palaces for demons and gods alike. Maya was known not just for construction, but for dimensional manipulation. His structures weren't made to last. They were made to vanish. And that's exactly what Dwarka did. At the end of Krishna's life, the sea began to rise. Earthquakes shook the land. The sky darkened, and the city sank. But not randomly. Intentionally. In the Harivamsa, Krishna is said to have summoned the wind chariot to dismantle the city before leaving this plane. The ships left, the gates closed, and the sea came in not to destroy but to erase. As if Dwarka wasn't a city at all, but a launch pad. And the Nemi weren't just mythological airships, they were evacuation vehicles, built to leave behind nothing, except, perhaps, a hum in the deep. Now let's talk about what wasn't found. Despite decades of marine archaeology, no human remains have been recovered from the lost city site. No burial grounds, no scattered bones, no signs of people trying to flee. Because they didn't. They departed. And the Nemi? They were never found. Not a single scrap, which shouldn't be possible. Ancient shipwrecks leave behind something: anchors, beams, debris, but not these. Because the Nemi, if the texts are right, weren't built of wood or metal. They were made of sound and thought, encoded with mantra frequency, controlled not by levers but by mind-state alignment, piloted not with maps but with intention. They didn't fly. They transitioned. Some scholars call it myth. Others, especially those who've read the less sanitized commentaries, call it technological consciousness ascension. And it wasn't the first time. Across ancient Indian texts, there are recurring references to celestial cities that appear, serve a purpose, then dissolve, not destroyed, just unmanifested. Like a program closed on a screen, but still running in the background. And maybe that's what Dwarka really is. Not a lost city. A paused one. Waiting. Beneath the waves, beneath the noise, beneath the forgetful churn of time. And maybe, just maybe, those Nemi ships are still down there. Not rusting. Not broken. Just asleep. Waiting for the day the resonance returns. The right thought. The right mantra. The right question. Or perhaps, the right descendant. Because legends say that Krishna promised to return, not as a man, as a frequency. And when that signal comes, the sea will part, the city will rise, and the ships will remember how to fly. The inverted temples beneath Ellora. There are temples built by hands. And then there are temples that seem to have been built by removal as if some divine eraser swept through stone, not to destroy it, but to sculpt reality backward. Welcome to Ellora, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a geological impossibility, and, according to some, a coded message from the last civilization to master the planet. Ellora is a complex of 34 caves, Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain temples carved into the Charnandri hills of Maharashtra. But caves is a misleading word. These are not natural caverns. These are monolithic structures, carved top-down into solid basalt cliffs. There is no additive construction, only subtraction. And the most impossible of them all? Kailasa Temple Cave 16. Cut from a single piece of stone, the Kailasa Temple is the world's largest monolithic structure. It is estimated to have involved the removal of over 400,000 tons of rock. There are pillars, chambers, staircases, balconies, even multiple levels, known of which required structural supports or materials being brought in from the outside. And that's just the visible part, because the true mystery of Ellora lies beneath it. There are sealed chambers under Kailasa, uneven ground vibrations, unexplained drops in magnetic field intensity. When radar scans were performed in the early 2000s, they revealed void-symmetrical, box-like anomalies beneath the temple complex. Not natural caves, not water pockets. Rooms that do not connect to any known passageways. Rooms that do not belong to any religious tradition. And rooms that have, so far, not been opened. Why? Because no one knows how. There are no entry points, no doors, no shafts. And drilling into Ellora has been declared illegal on grounds of cultural preservation. Convenient. Let's go back to the surface. The carving of Kailasa Temple is estimated to have taken centuries using traditional methods, but legend claims it was done in 3 years. 3. An impossible feat, unless the people who made it weren't carving stone, but vibrating it. There are forgotten texts, Agni Purana, Shilpa Shastras that describe a tool called the Ankusha Vajran instrument that removes stone like water flows from a broken pot. Some take that to mean poetic metaphor. Others think it describes sonic resonance, a device or process that breaks molecular bonds using frequency, something that cuts without blades, removes without friction, carves with sound. And if such a device existed, then Ellora wasn't built, it was tuned. Every wall, every chamber, every spiral path set to resonate with a specific vibration. Visitors report strange sensations, disorientation, time slippage, whispers that don't echo. The temple is alive, or rather, interactive. And it's not just Kailasa. Caves 10 through 12 are known as the Vishvakarma or Carpenter Caves. They feature ribbed ceilings that mimic the hull of a ship. Ask yourself this: why would a rock-cut temple resemble the interior of an ark? Unless someone once tried to simulate something they had seen, or replicate something they had used. Now let's talk about alignment. Ellora is not randomly placed. It forms a triangle with 2 other sites, Ajanta, another cave complex, and the ancient city of Paithana, spiritual geometry that matches certain tantric yantras used for containment and energy focusing. More notably, Kailasa's Garbhagriha, sanctum, is aligned to the Polaris star knot metaphorically, but physically. A shaft allows starlight to reach the innermost shrine on certain days of the year. How did they do that? No one knows. But some believe the star alignment is part of a larger mechanism, that the temple isn't just a temple, it's a receiver. And maybe those sealed rooms underneath? They're not storage chambers. They're data cores, or worse, containment zones. Because there's another legend, unspoken, almost forgotten. It says Ellora was built as a reversal, not as a place to contact the divine, but as a trap for something that came from the sky, entered the stone, and had to be locked in downward motion, forced to spiral back into the earth, inverted, sealed, and watched. And that's why the temples were carved from above. Why no one built up? Because the threat wasn't above them, it was below. And the only way to stop it was to build the earth itself into a key. So maybe the rooms under Kailasa are not locked for preservation. Maybe they're locked by design, because inside them is not treasure, not scriptures, not bones, but a machine, still active, still sinking, still waiting for the signal to unlock. And the last time that signal came, the sky turned black, the oceans rose, and the stars blinked. Not out of sequence, but as a warning. The undecaying saints of the Himalayas. The Himalayas are not mountains. They're vaults, gold, high, and glittering with spiritual metaphors. Yes, but beneath the snow and stone, they hold something that refuses to be explained, or to die. Because somewhere up there, wrapped in silence and ice, are the undecaying saints of India. Not myths, not metaphors. Actual human forms that haven't aged, haven't decomposed, and may not even be asleep. You've heard the legends, yogis who meditate for centuries, masters who turn breath into light, bodies found in caves, sitting upright, skin still supple, nails still growing. The official term is Jivan Mukta, one who attains liberation while alive. But these aren't abstract ideas. There are records, reports, photos, and, in at least 2 known cases, open visits. Let's start with the most famous one, Gyeonggunj, or Sambala, if you're looking through a Tibetan lens. A hidden city, said to lie deep in the Himalayas, cloaked from normal perception, not just physically hard to reach, dimensionally sealed. You don't find it with maps, you find it by vibration. The right state of mind, the right karma, the right password. Gyeonggunj is said to be home to immortal yogis, rishis who wait, preserving ancient knowledge until the rest of the world is ready to re-enter cosmic adulthood. They live in ageless bodies, practice science that appears as magic, and interact with chosen individuals when necessary. Some of India's most revered sages, including Lahiri Mahasaya, Babaji, and Trailanga Swamiare, said to have encountered these beings. Some even became them. Then there's the lesser-known, but very real, case of Tibetan self-mummification. Yes, that's a thing. Practiced by advanced monks, it's a brutal, multi-year discipline of meditation, fasting, herbal tonics, and mantra. The goal? To slow metabolism to zero without dying. Some succeed. Their bodies remain in the lotus position for centuries. No decay, no smell, no sign of rot. Just skin over bone, eyes closed. Waiting. Still more unnerving is the case of the Rupkan skeletons. More than 300 ancient human remains found around a frozen Himalayan lake. Some date back over 1,000 years. Others are more recent. Yet, some of the bodies showed no signs of typical decay, preserved beyond what science expected. Same climate, same air, same altitude. Different result. Why? Because some of them were not dead when they stopped moving. They were in suspended states, a yogic technique known as Kichari Mudra and Samadhi, allowing the practitioner to exit ordinary time. In that state, biology doesn't apply. You don't age. You don't breathe. You pause. And here's the darker question. What if these aren't spiritual attainments? What if they're technological protocols? Some kind of ancient science that used breath, geometry, mineral vibration, and internal alchemy to place the body into a quantum freesia living stasis field. In other words, this is not resurrection. This is hibernation. A planned pause. And they aren't meditating. They're waiting for a trigger. One cave in northern Uttarakhand, still unnamed publicly, referenced only in high-altitude oral traditions, contains a sealed tomb. The man inside sits cross-legged, has no visible signs of decomposition. Locals refuse to go near it. One shepherd who did spoke in tongues for 3 days, and then stopped speaking forever. The few researchers who've tried to investigate, denied access. Official reason, terrain instability. Unofficial reason, classified. Yes, that word. Because some suspect, the Indian government, specifically the Ministry of Culture, in coordination with international badishahs, quietly tagged several such sites for spiritual protection. What they mean is containment. Because if these saints are real, and if they wake up, they don't come back to pray. They come back to reset. Because the ancient texts are clear, the rishis are timekeepers, custodians of the last cycle. They survived the previous Pralayathi dissolution, and they were told to return only when the pattern repeats. So, maybe they're not undead. Maybe they're just early, too early. And they're waiting for us to catch up, to remember, to tune back to the frequency they've been holding in place for centuries. The frequency that might unlock the next world, or erase this one. Because resurrection is a nice word, but what they really are is backups. The astronomical alignments of Konark Sunday Temple. There are temples that praise the sun, and then there are temples that move with it. Konark isn't just a temple. It's a machine made of stone, silence, shadow, and a geometry so exact it could make a supercomputer sweat. Located on the eastern coast of Odisha, The Konark Sunday Temple is a 13th century marvel dedicated to Surya, the sun god. Built by King Narasimhadeva I, the temple was designed in the shape of a gigantic chariot pulled by 7 stone horses with 24 elaborately carved wheels. That much is true. That much you can Google. But the mystery lies in what those wheels do, and in what the temple is still tracking. Each of the 24 wheels isn't decorative. They are sundials, not symbolic, but functional, and not simple ones. Each wheel has 8 major spokes and 8 minor, dividing the day into precise intervals. When sunlight hits the right spoke, you can read the exact time down to the minute. Let's say that again. A 700-year-old structure can still tell time more accurately than your smartwatch, using nothing but sunlight and shadow. And that's just the beginning. The temple's orientation is precisely aligned with the east-west axis. The main sanctum was once designed to channel the first rays of the rising sun to directly illuminate the image of Surya within. But here's the thing, the idol is missing. So is the sanctum. What remains is the Mandapathy dance hall, the wheels, and the silence. Why? Some say the sanctum collapsed. Others say it was deliberately dismantled. But local lore tells a different story. They say the sanctum held something too powerful, too precise, too alive. An object they call the Magnet of Konark. According to legend, the central spire once housed a massive Lodestania natural magnet of extraordinary strength. This magnet was so powerful, it caused the main idol made of iron and suspended mid-air to float. That's not metaphor. That's ancient maglev. The legend goes further. The magnet interfered with naval compasses of passing ships. Portuguese sailors allegedly removed it to save their navigation. When they did, the structure destabilized, and the sanctum fell. Officially, there's no record of this magnet. Unofficially, the temple has no foundation records, no blueprints, no notes, and no explanation for how such a massive structure, originally 100 feet taller than what remains, was built so fast, so precisely, with no margin of error. Because Konark isn't just a temple, it's a calendar, a timekeeper, and possibly a transmission device. Let's look at the numbers. 24 wheels equals 24 hours in a day. 8 spokes equals 8 pahars, 3-hour intervals in traditional Indian timekeeping. 7 horses equals 7 days of the week. 12 smaller shrines equals 12 zodiac signs. 365 carved sculptures equals 365 days of the year. Konark was built to model time, but also to manipulate rhythm. Some researchers believe the temple acts as a resonator, that its wheels and walls channel not just light but vibration. Sonic mapping of the site reveals nodes of frequency amplification spots where mantras echo longer, sharper, deeper. Stand in the right place, and your voice returns with more energy than you gave it. This isn't acoustics. This is resonant architecture. And the materials? Granite, chlorite, laterite. Stones with piezoelectric properties, meaning they respond to pressure and vibration by generating small electrical charges. Now ask yourself, was Konark built to honor the sun? Or to interface with it? Ancient texts suggest that Surya is not just a god, but a conscious being, a transmitter, a judge, a mirror, the eye of the universe. If so, then Konark wasn't just a prayer site. It was a communication hub. And here's where it gets wild. Some believe Konark is part of a triangulated grid-along with Modhera Sunday Temple in Gujarat and Martand Sunday Temple in Kashmir. All 3 align with ecliptic events. All 3 were sites of solar observance. All 3 are now damaged. Coincidence? Or was something turned off? Maybe the temples weren't built to last forever. Maybe they were built to work together as part of a planetary circuit, monitoring solar behavior, not just light, but solar frequency, magnetism, conscious influence. And when the system broke, the idols vanished, the centers collapsed, and all that remains are the wheels still turning, still aligned, still watching the sun rise every morning as if waiting for something. A signal, a reboot, a return. Because time doesn't forget. It cycles. And Konark? It's still counting, still sinking, still spinning quietly under a hot Odisha sky, measuring days we can't name, waiting for a moment we've forgotten how to fear. The moment when the sun answers back. The astronomical alignments of Konark's Sunday temple. There are temples that praise the sun. And then there are temples that move with it. Konark isn't just a temple. It's a machine made of stone, silence, shadow, and a geometry so exact it could make a supercomputer sweat. Located on the eastern coast of Odisha, the Konark Sunday Temple is a 13th century marvel dedicated to Surya, the sun god. Built by King Narasimhadeva I, the temple was designed in the shape of a gigantic chariot pulled by 7 stone horses with 24 elaborately carved wheels. That much is true. That much you can Google. But the mystery lies in what those wheels do, and in what the temple is still tracking. Each of the 24 wheels isn't decorative. They are sundials, not symbolic, but functional, and not simple ones. Each wheel has 8 major spokes and 8 minor, dividing the day into precise intervals. When sunlight hits the right spoke, you can read the exact time down to the minute. Let's say that again. A 700-year-old structure can still tell time more accurately than your smartwatch, using nothing but sunlight and shadow. And that's just the beginning. The temple's orientation is precisely aligned with the east-west axis. The main sanctum was once designed to channel the first rays of the rising sun to directly illuminate the image of Surya within. But here's the thing. The idol is missing. So is the sanctum. What remains is the Mandapathy dance hall, the wheels, and the silence. Why? Some say the sanctum collapsed. Others say it was deliberately dismantled. But local lore tells a different story. They say the sanctum held something too powerful, too precise, too alive. An object they call the Magnet of Konark. According to legend, the central spire once housed a massive Lodestania natural magnet of extraordinary strength. This magnet was so powerful, it caused the main idol made of iron and suspended mid-air to float. That's not metaphor. That's ancient maglev. The legend goes further. The magnet interfered with naval compasses of passing ships. Portuguese sailors allegedly removed it to save their navigation. When they did, the structure destabilized, and the sanctum fell. Officially, there's no record of this magnet. Unofficially, the temple has no foundation records, no blueprints, no notes, and no explanation for how such a massive structure, originally 100 feet taller than what remains, was built so fast, so precisely, with no margin of error. Because Konark isn't just a temple. It's a calendar, a timekeeper, and possibly a transmission device. Let's look at the numbers. 24 wheels equals 24 hours in a day. 8 spokes equals 8 pahars, 3-hour intervals in traditional Indian timekeeping. 7 horses equals 7 days of the week. 12 smaller shrines equals 12 zodiac signs. 365 carved sculptures equals 365 days of the year. Konark was built to model time, but also to manipulate rhythm. Some researchers believe the temple acts as a resonator, that its wheels and walls channel not just light but vibration. Sonic mapping of the site reveals nodes of frequency amplification spots where mantras echo longer, sharper, deeper. Stand in the right place, and your voice returns with more energy than you gave it. This isn't acoustics. This is resonant architecture. And the materials? Granite, chlorite, laterite. Stones with piezoelectric properties, meaning they respond to pressure and vibration by generating small electrical charges. Now ask yourself, was Konark built to honor the sun? Or to interface with it? Ancient texts suggest that Surya is not just a god, but a conscious being, a transmitter, a judge, a mirror, the eye of the universe. If so, then Konark wasn't just a prayer site. It was a communication hub. And here's where it gets wild. Some believe Konark is part of a triangulated grid-along with Modhera Sunday Temple in Gujarat and Martand Sunday Temple in Kashmir. All three align with ecliptic events. All three were sites of solar observance. All three are now damaged. Coincidence? Or was something turned off? Maybe the temples weren't built to last forever. Maybe they were built to work together as part of a planetary circuit, monitoring solar behavior, not just light, but solar frequency, magnetism, conscious influence. And when the system broke, the idols vanished, the centers collapsed, and all that remains are the wheels still turning, still aligned, still watching the sun rise every morning as if waiting for something. A signal, a reboot, a return. Because time doesn't forget. It cycles. And Konark? It's still counting, still sinking, still spinning quietly under a hot Odisha sky, measuring days we can't name, waiting for a moment we've forgotten how to fear. The moment when the sun answers back, the sealed chamber of Padmanabhiswamy Temple. There's ancient royal treasure rich. And then there's Padmanabhiswamy Temple, a sprawling gold-laced fortress of divinity in Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. This temple isn't just sacred. It's guarded, heavily, by law, by tradition, by ritual. And if you believe certain priests be something older than any of those. Because beneath this temple lies a series of vaults, and one of them vault refuses to open. We're not talking locked. We're talking sealed, as in entwined with a specific kind of Vedic sound laka mantra, coded vibrational barrier that no tool, torch, or ordinance has yet breached, and every attempt to force it ends badly. Let's back up. In 2011, the Indian Supreme Court ordered an inventory of the temple's subterranean vaults. What they found was staggering. Gold coins by the ton, jewel-encrusted crowns, diamond-studded ornaments, golden thrones, ceremonial weapons, and enough physical wealth to place the temple as the wealthiest religious institution on earth. The haul was conservatively valued at $22 billion. But that was only 5 vaults. Vault B was left untouched. Why? Because of its curse. Local tradition states that Vault B is guarded by Nagabandhama serpent spell placed by ancient tantric priests, meant to repel the unworthy and trap those who force the gate. The door has no hinges, no keyhole, just a pair of cobra engraving sand, a legend that says anyone who opens it improperly will invite cosmic catastrophe. Superstition? Maybe. Until you read the reports. In 1931, a team tried to force it open with iron tools. They stopped when they heard strange noises from inside, the hissing of air that wasn't air, and a vibration that made their tools hum. One guard later reported vision loss. Another refused to speak again. Fast forward to 2011. When 5 vaults were opened, there was pushback not just from the temple priests, but from the royal family of Travancore, who argued Vault B must remain closed for spiritual reasons. Even the Supreme Court paused. Why? Because the last priest to attempt the opening of Vault B by chanting the Garuda mantra, the only ritual known to undo the seal deed mysteriously just days before the final ceremony. Since then, nothing. The vault remains sealed. And the real question has shifted from, what's inside, to why was it sealed in the first place? Let's speculate. Some believe Vault B doesn't contain gold. It contains knowledge, specifically a text, or a relic, or a device, something not meant for this epoch, something that predates the Vedas, something from the pre-flood world, from a civilization whose remnants we call myth. Others suggest the chamber is a dimensional anchor, not just a room, but a node, stabilizing something underneath the temple. Because here's what no one likes to talk about. Padmanabhaswamy Temple is built on serpent land. Not metaphorically. Literally. The region is called Ananta Kshetram, land of the endless serpent, the deity of the temple lord Vishnuis, shown in reclining pose upon the cosmic serpent Ananta. The symbolism is overwhelming. Unless it's not symbolism. Unless the serpent is real. A force. A consciousness. A vibrational entity sealed beneath the temple, coiled like the Kundalini itself, held in place by geometry, mantra, and Vault B. The temple's architecture reflects this. Every corridor, sanctum, and shrine is aligned with cosmic harmonics. The layout is not for human convenience. It's for containment. And here's where it gets even weirder. Satellite surveys around the temple show subterranean corridors leading away from the vault tunnels that terminate in now sealed caves, stretching toward the Arabian Sea. Escape routes? Or energy lines? Some tantric schools suggest that Vault B is not a door. It's a lens. Opening it without the correct consciousness state would not release treasure. It would release a shift. In energy, in time, in memory. That might be what the priests fear. Not wealth loss, reality loss, and maybe the gold in the other vaults? That's the decoy. The bait. The part we were allowed to find. So that we wouldn't look deeper. Because sometimes the richest place on earth is hiding not opulence, but a lock. And the key isn't metal. It's a sound. It's a moment. It's a mind. And until that mind arrives, Vault B stays sealed. Because the thing inside is still dreaming. And when it wakes, we'd better be ready to remember what we sealed it for. The voice in the stepwells of Adalaj. There are places designed to quench your thirst. And then there are places that ask you, how deep do you want to go? In the village of Adalaj, just north of Ahmedabad in Gujarat, there's a stepwell, a 5-story stone labyrinth of stairs, balconies, and open-air shafts, known for its intricate carvings and eerie coolness. Locals call it Adalaj Nivav. Tourists call it beautiful. But the priests? They don't talk much about it. Because Adalaj Stepwell isn't just an architectural marvel. It's a resonance trap. And it's still listening. Built in 1499 by Queen Rudabai after her husband was murdered, the stepwell was supposedly a monument of mourning and an act of water diplomacy. Every corner is lined with floral carvings, motifs of dancers, elephants, and cosmic symbolism. But something's wrong. Not visibly. Not structurally. Acoustically. If you descend the spiral steps into its lower levels and speak, no matter how softly your voice bounces back, delayed, warped slightly, as if someone else is repeating your words just after you do. It's not an echo. It's response lag. Sound engineers who've studied the site say it produces non-linear resonance patterns. The well's proportions, its symmetry, water level, and column spacing create feedback loops in certain frequencies, especially between 108 Hz, which, incidentally, is the human chakra resonance range. You think that's coincidence? Wait. In ancient times, stepwells weren't just about water. They were places of passage. Spiritual, emotional, and according to old Gujarati legends, dimensional. They say Adalaj was built on a cursed site. That beneath the well, A sealed tunnel extends into the earth, a passage known as Sutarkani Vav, said to lead not to another town, but to another realm. The priests used to say it led to Padalathe underworld of the Nagas. Today, they say nothing. Because people who go too far down come back quiet, or not at all. And here's where it gets colder. Literally. Thermal scans show an abnormal temperature drop on the 4th level. Everywhere else follows a standard thermal gradient. But on level 4, a consistent 6.6 degrees Celsius drop. That's not environmental. That's engineered. One theory? It's a cooling chamber for consciousness, a space designed to slow mental activity to induce trance states. Some tantric traditions say a still mind can hear the voice of the earth. That's poetic. Until people start actually hearing things. There are countless reports of whispers, murmurs, conversations where no one's speaking. Some say it's wind. Others say it's a loop that the well records voices, stores them, and sometimes plays them back years later. One night, watchmen claimed to hear a woman humming on level 3. They found the same tune on a 1970s tape recording made by a researcher who died before finishing his thesis. The audio? Never released. Locked in archives at a local university. Ask for it, and you're told it's missing. Of course, because the well isn't just collecting water. It's collecting memory. Some even believe it was built for that purpose, to hold thought forms, emotion, sound, a memory architecture carved into stone, like a psychic drive. And that's what makes Adalaj dangerous. It's not haunted. It's active. A living construct of emotional acoustics. If you've suffered grief, the well will remember it. If you feel rage, it will amplify it. If you come seeking peace, it might grant you clarity or strip you bare. And if you listen long enough, it will speak back in your voice, but not with your words. And that's the thing about stepwells like Adalaj. They don't echo, they answer. Not to tourists, not to cameras, to the frequency of your soul. And when you hear it, you'll understand why Queen Rutabai built it, not to honor death, but to seal something beneath it. Something that breathes through stone, sleeps underwater, and only wakes when someone listens too closely. So go ahead, say something, just once. The voice you hear might be yours, or it might be something waiting for you to respond.